school and getting a master's in public health at the same time.
Jim Adderholt here.
Jane Plummer here.
Megan Heil here.
Scott Safford here.
Daniel Hughes here.
Lori Wolf has got an excused absence. Please rise, everyone, for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please stay standing. We seek your blessings on the tasks before us. Bless our efforts with clear insight, our deliberations with wisdom, our work and our clarity and accuracy, and our decisions with impartiality. Amen. First up on our agenda, approval of the meeting minutes from last month. Jason, I also noticed we didn't get any meetings from our joint session. Are we still waiting on those?
I will check on those.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions, changes, comments, concerns?
No changes, but comments. I think these were, is there somebody different drafted these minutes than prior?
Did it myself personally. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
No, absolutely. No, I'm sure they just,
well, I thought they were well drafted.
Michelle does a good job, I think, of following up. She's been
Yeah.
really getting on them, so.
Motion to approve?
Okay, go for it.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting minutes are approved. Next up on our agenda is the public hearing, the 5-year capital improvement plan, the CIP.
Jason Green, Community Development. Yes, so last year we talked about, I want to say going back to the way it used to be done, sort of, and I think what you saw is basically a capital list of equipment and some other things. And this year, what we've done is really try to create a 5-year capital improvement plan for you to look at and see, because really is your role in development, in the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan, is looking at our codes and regulations and considering, concurrency-related items, infrastructure. We don't have a lot of road widenings that are going to happen on the island, but those are the types of things that generally are looked at. So we just provided that to you, and it's also use of, just for the public's knowledge, most of this is a use of impact fees that we've collected over time to enhance I would say the transportation system, primarily the sidewalk and trail network.
So you're saying the first 1, 2, 3, 6 of these are what?
So we broke them down. We've gone around in different ways to do it, and I looked at the way they used to do it in the past. But this time we did it by fee, basically by where the source of revenue is. Yeah. So those first ones are use of impact fees, and then you can see where we broke it down to design and construction, and then the timeline is really the most important part of it. The 2019 is this fiscal year that is ongoing, just to show you that, and I can probably label that as current just for clarity. And then the years that you label are always because remember our fiscal years are over a 2-year calendar period. So 1920, we call it the fiscal year 20. So that next year's fiscal year is the second column, the 20. But we were just trying to show you what's ongoing now. So you see a lot of design and things going on for sidewalks. And then in the future years, we'll bid those out and construct those.
So the first 6 here are sidewalks for 5th Street, 3rd Street, 2nd Street, 1st Street, Crescent Street, and the Bay Oaks expansion?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's impact fees. Then there's the gas tax projects, and then general revenue that we have right now, and then some grants. And that grant, just to let you know about that, is it's budgeted right now through DOT. And hopefully that'll come out this year. And that's for a street traffic light at that intersection. The old San Carlos and Estero, where you have the three-way stop sign. That's part of the overall the management of the bridge and traffic flow. The idea is a traffic light there, a traffic light at Crescent, I believe, in the future, and then so there's like 2 or 3 traffic lights that'll be signalized together and time up based on traffic flows and peak periods and all that to get things moving. So it'll in theory, I guess it'll also allow for greater pedestrian walkability, and it'll be able to be controlled, so you're not walking 20 feet and then stopping, then walking across another street and stopping. It should all be, in theory, timed up together. But the first part of it is the part that's our role because of our city streets is that grant. So that's, rather than just give you a list of equipment that the town's going to buy, we decided to put together this table to show you and track this, and over time we'll update it every year, essentially. So this comes back to you when the budget gets adopted in September. The traditional way is this comes back to you sometime in the fall after that to technically do a minor or an amendment to the comprehensive plan to recognize this 5-year capital improvement plan, and we're supposed to do that every year. That used to be done, and it fell off sometime between 10 and today. I'm not sure why, but that's the traditional way to do it.
Before we adopt it, will we have 5 years' worth of numbers?
We don't have projects picked for that far out right now, so yeah, that's part of the process. Is part of the process with you and with the council, obviously, is identifying those projects, and we're trying to do a better job of doing the long-term planning for that than just year by year.
Question. Besides yourself, who are the personnel that provide the input to arrive at this?
Public Works, they're heavily involved, obviously, in the management of contracts and streets. So we try to time these up with utility improvements. So you've got a lot of stormwater and water line replacement. And so it makes sense to do sidewalk projects in those places. So you're already, tearing up the sides of the street, and you might as well put the sidewalk down instead of going back a year later and doing it again. So that's one consideration. And also hot streets. Most of these streets are ones that have been a long time have been on the list of priority for based on downtown, based on our the amount of people that we have here.
Okay, I like the fact that you've categorized them by source of funding. I think that's a good way of doing it. That's my own personal view. My other comment would be that the very last item, the storm maintenance thing, are those the outfall sewers?
The swell reclamation is really a side streets, or I guess our regular streets that have, over time, the swell has been filled in by others or filled in on its own to try to reclaim some of those swales to create some off-street drainage. So it's not necessarily connecting. It's not the stormwater that you're thinking on the side streets now, where they're running a lot of pipe. It's trying to reclaim back some of those swales on the edges of the streets.
So this is just the swales and not the outfall.
Nope, it's not
pipe.
the other stuff. Nope, it's just
Why
related
aren't they
to.
in there? I mean,
That's because that's budgeted under a different project right now. So that was something that it's not really a concurrency related item. You can make the argument that that last one doesn't really need to be on here. We were just trying to give you a picture of that. That wasn't a good answer for you, I know.
I'd follow the distinction, but maybe you could explain why it's not a concurrency item. And
So with that was a separate, I guess, fee and budgeted item. So we didn't include all of that stormwater that's being done. I think that's more of a flood prevention and reducing effort than a concurrency. Because when I look at concurrency, it's a level of service, and there's not necessarily an adopted level of service for that. We're just trying to do the best we can with that runoff. Swell reclamation is a project. It's not really a capital project. It's more of a maintenance project. So, but it was just kind of a bigger project that we're looking to doing year after year, so we're letting you know about it.
Are you talking about like the ones that are on private property that then the swells drain down to a an existing hole that's already there for the drainage,
No,
like on?
no private property. I want to
No
make that,
private
there's no
right-of-way.
private property. It's all in the right of way. So there's a lot of side streets that used to have swale, and over time, for whatever reason, they've kind of filled themselves in. Sometimes it's by others' actions, but sometimes it's just through lack of maintenance. So it's really more of a maintenance program that's returning some drainage efforts to kind of get the water off the road and have a place for it to go. I've heard comments over the last year and a half, a lot of roads that people say they used to, I guess, play in the ditch, so to speak, when they were kids, and that ditch is no longer there. So
Evo is
it's
a good example.
those types of things. And so you're seeing a lot of flooding up into the driveways and into the yards and the streets, and other people are getting flooded out by that. So we're trying to return as a pilot project. They're trying it, and then there's a long-term plan to try to street by street recover those that we can. And that's on top of or in addition to, separate from what you were talking about, Dan, with the big utility
Right.
project.
And I was told somewhere along the line that the best way the most efficient way of purifying stormwater is through a swale, by running through a natural swale. And the water then runs off into the back bay. I'm certainly in favor of that, of what you're proposing here.
And a lot of this will be natural ground infiltration, absorption, generally through the soils. That's part of a holding place for it, and then it'll absorb in the grass rather than on the street.
There'll be some unhappy property owners, but it's necessary in my view.
Some of it has become parking. That's true. So we're trying to be sensitive to that, but also recognize that it's the town's right of way and use for the public to make the roads better. So that's the goal.
I have one more question. Based on the fact that these things are paid for through fees, I'm curious what the fees go to that come from the special magistrate. It seems like we have 72 hearings, and there's an awful lot of money coming into the town for hearing violations. What does that money fund?
Well, I'll field that one a little bit. There are a lot of hearings, and there are a lot of fines that are potentially imposed. And one of two things generally occurs when a finding of violation is made by the special magistrate. One, the property owner comes into compliance, hopefully in a relatively short period of time, and so the amount of fines that accrue, if any, is relatively small or non-existent, because they generally are given a period of time before the fines begin to run. Then there's another group of people, and I would say there's a fair amount of individuals and property owners who fall within the category I'm about to describe, which is the special magistrate finds them in violation, gives them a period of time to come into compliance, and they don't come into compliance. Or if they do come into compliance, it's well after the special magistrate has the time period for which they've been given. For a number of reasons, it's very hard sometimes to collect those funds. I like to tell people, for those who don't really know, code enforcement is really designed as a system of voluntary compliance. And so if you have those recalcitrant or unwilling property owners that aren't, there's really very few options past just allowing the fine to continue to accrue. In those instances, the majority of them get caught or become, to come forward is when the property owner goes to sell their property, as you know, or to refinance it. And the title company does a search, and all of a sudden, there's a lien, and it needs to be remedied. And sometimes the violation has never been brought into compliance, or sometimes it was brought into compliance, again, a long time after. And that's when, there is the potential for collection. So how much we actually collect versus what's on the books sometimes are very different numbers.
You know what those fees go to?
Some of it obviously goes to fund the code enforcement system, the payment of the special magistrate, funding of the staff people, and running of the Mr. Green's department and the building department, which is the overseer of the code compliance department.
I would find it interesting to have numbers on that. Jason, can you get that for us next meeting?
Sure, but I just want to be clear that there's no direct relationship to any of that to the
I know.
capital projects that we're
I'm
talking about.
just
That's
curious
for the public,
'cause
I don't want to confuse
I'm-
anybody about fees.
I'm
so.
shocked at the amount that are,
Those
for Thursday.
fees do not go to the CIP, are not included in
So,
the CIP, so.
there, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but there may be an indirect, so if fees are collected through whatever process, and they go into the general fund, and they become part of the town's money, there may be at some point, then that money gets reallocated to projects and budgets and that sort of thing later on. Yes, maybe there's an indirect component to that. Most of what you see here are impact fees, gas taxes, other things that we collect through other processes. No relationship to the code enforcement process.
I've got one question.
I
Why is-
have a question.
There we go.
I'm sorry. Is somebody,
Ahead of you.
No, go ahead.
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Jim, do you have one?
I just had a question on the, under gas taxes, the Estero Boulevard lighting conversion to LED. I see there's no funding. Is that because that's a county project, or is there just no funding allocated yet?
She told me, I can't remember. It's not gonna cost us. I guess there's some trade-off or some funding for that is not part of specifically the town's budget, I guess, so it's a zero cost to us. It's a project that's gonna happen. I don't know, I can't remember if it's offset by the savings, and then that's how that's doing that, but I'd have to ask Chelsea, but
Curious, just the broader question though, is that, so that's a town responsibility, the lighting on Estero Boulevard, not the county?
so there's, we pay, I believe there's a payment of the cost of the utility of the light itself. And so I think that's, I don't want to be misleading, but I think that's how there's a transfer of why it doesn't cost anything. The
Vegetation,
substantial savings that's going to happen by the LED, I think is what pays for it.
who decides and pays for trees along Estero Boulevard? Is that a county decision at that point?
So the county portion of their roadway, right, so basically, essentially from the bridge south, I guess I'll say, is, yes, I think the town council's been involved with discussions of future landscaping improvements, but essentially, yes, it's a county right away.
Yeah, the detail, the design plan for segments 5 and 6, I understand there's going to be a lot of new sidewalks put in. When will those be available to the public?
I don't know, but I'll check on that, and it may be, I'll check to see if it's on the website, on the county's website or not. You said 5 and 6? Is
I
what you're
think so,
curious
yeah.
about? Okay.
In front of Santini Plaza, that area there. That'd be great. Thanks, Jason.
Everything?
Got it answered. Go ahead.
At what, just this to our council, that at what point is a lien placed? Is there a dollar figure at which time the town puts a lien on a specific parcel?
Yeah, the procedure is that a certain period of time has to pass. I think it's, don't quote me, but I'm pretty darn sure it's 3 months, that the property has not come into compliance, and there's, fine that's been accruing pursuant to the special magistrate order. And after that point in time, staff files an affidavit of non-compliance. We take the matter back before the special magistrate for an entry of an order of lien, authorizing that order to be recorded in the public records of the county, and it becomes a lien against the property. And generally, it says that it continues to accrue on a daily basis until such time as the property comes into compliance.
Thank you.
I have a question about the sidewalk improvements. Why is there a year gap between design and construction?
So, one, you don't want to present something and then not be able to meet it. Second part is size of the town. That's a lot of sidewalks to prepare bid packages for and deal with contracts and that sort of thing. So it's going to take some time to prepare all that. I believe the design for them will be done sometime before the end of this fiscal year. So then basically it takes next year our goal is to get it done in the next fiscal year, but the reality is it's a lot of projects to get out. It's, it's a lot.
I was wondering why half of them weren't budgeted for next year and the other half the year after. It seems like you're doing a lot all at once.
Yeah, I mean, there's different, depending on the challenges that come, I mean, I think we have different ideas of techniques to accomplish that, whether it's one contractor, whether it's multiple contractors, different ways you can do it.
So you're looking at economies of scale doing it all at once,
Yep.
since you've got all the equipment down?
Yep,
Okay.
so yeah, right, it depends on the phasing, depends on the staffing ability, depends, or not just the staff's ability, but also the contractor's ability. But that decision hasn't been made yet, how to do that, but that takes time to put all that together. It's a substantial amount of, we just did a bid for a small project, and I think it was, 120 pages of documents to put together and make sure are correct to that project. So it's just a lot of time to put these together.
With TPI's CPD, don't they have to do the sidewalks around all their projects?
Yeah, there's portions of their project that they have to do sidewalks on. So there's, and that's part of the reason why this, there's a lot of coordination with approved projects, including the Matanzas Inn, who has a requirement for sidewalk. And so there's been a lot of coordination effort on our part and the property owners' parts to everybody do it right. So they may have a design, somebody, TPI or whoever, may have a design of sidewalk. We're doing the drainage and utility part of it, and we want to make sure it all matches. So that's what we're doing now as part of this, is making sure that both sides of the streets and all these locations match up. We don't want somebody to go in and put a sidewalk in, then have to tear it up. We're trying to be efficient with, obviously, public dollars and the perception to the public. We don't want somebody, small town, everybody run around and say, look, oh, what they did. They just put that in last year and they got to tear it up. We don't want that. So we're trying to time it with all this development activity and make sure it all matches and works for everybody. So that's what we're doing right now. We've got probably 3 different projects in that area that we're trying to match it all up. And we don't always know their timing, so it's who goes first kind of questions.
Any other questions? I have one on the swale project. Has this town identified particular target areas, particular target streets? It's a lot of money in this budget for that over the next 6 years in this. It's one of the few that's full for a pilot program. So have we identified specific streets, do you know, to start this off with?
I don't recall the specific streets. I'm sure there's probably a list. I can get that to you individually afterwards, if it's okay. I'll check with Public Works to see if they have the specific list approved. My guess is probably not. I think it probably still has to go to council as far as that specific list, but I'll check on that.
And there's close to $1 million in here over a 5-year period. That's why I was just wondering if we've actually done something with this, identified it, or put together an actual plan for this money.
So I believe there's been work done on this to figure out how much it costs, whether it's per linear foot. So there was some work done last year to see whether, one, we could do it and it's efficient, whether it works, and what kind of the man-hours, manpower, and dollar amount is spent to do it. So I believe this budget is based on that experience and how much they can get for that dollar amount, and whether it's efficient to do it in-house or out of.
I will add to that, since sometimes I'm in the chambers when Mr. Green isn't. My recollection is that and Mr. Green mentioned that the pilot program there isn't several streets that have recurring drainage problems that have been identified as the initial ones, and that is moving forward. I just can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember it's on the tip of my tongue, which of the streets.
One of them's got to be Andre Marr.
And remember, I mean, that's a great point, though. I just want to hit down that. I don't want the public to see this and think that this is the amount budgeted for the next 5 years, because those future budgets haven't been done. So it's a plan.
Holding places.
Rule of thumb is your first year, your capital improvement plan is budgeted. Second year to third year is planned for, or you have money, allocated coming to you, whether it's through grants or other sources. And then your fourth and fifth year we hope to be able to budget for that, and that's a project we'd like to do. So that's kind of the general rule of thumb on these CIPs.
Any other questions from? Well, this is technically a public hearing, so if any public would like to make a comment, you're welcome to step up, state your.
And ultimately, if there's other projects that we've missed or that are dire need that are related to, again, essentially concurrency or infrastructure related, we'd like to hear that. So.
No public comment? Okay, then we close the public hearing. You want us to approve this? A motion to approve?
Yes, I think just from that is the support of capital projects, and then it helps build the budget. So ultimately, this list goes to the council for budgeting purposes. And then ultimately, they have to adopt that budget in September. And then whatever the dollar amounts flush out at, it'll come back to you for a final approval, or again, for a recommendation for the comp plan.
I'll motion to approve the 5-year capital improvements plan for capital projects as presented.
I'll second it. Dan Hughes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0 today. 6-0 today. It's a long week. All right, moving along.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next is a public hearing for minor amendment to the Leaky Tiki CPD. We need to swear in anybody who's going to testify.
That is correct.
So if you are here to speak, testify on any matters here in front of the LPA, please stand.
Including the items that are on for historic designation, because they also qualify as public hearings.
Oh.
Please, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? The witnesses have been sworn. Madam Chair, at this point, it would be appropriate for the board members to disclose any ex parte communications you may have had with regard to the proposed minor amendment to the Leaky Tiki CPD.
Tim?
I did stop at the Leaky Tiki Sunday afternoon, and I took a little tour with one of the bartenders just to see the area impacted.
In the Leaky Tiki.
I've had a few refreshments there.
Yes.
No, I'm familiar with the property many times.
And I have partaked in a beverage or two there, too.
Just for the record, there's, I'm going to say this, and that none of those visits or communications is going to affect your decision here this morning. It's going to be based upon the evidence testimony presented here this morning. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Good morning, I'm Kelly with Community Development Services. Case number SEZ 2019-0019. Owner of Leaky Tiki Restaurant located at 1821 Estero Boulevard is seeking a special exception from condition that was previously approved under Resolution 9627 that prohibits outdoor live entertainment on the subject property. A special exception request to modify condition number 3 to allow outdoor live entertainment until 9 p.m. Currently, the restaurant is permitted to play music indoor. The applicant has requested a special exception stating that the outdoor live entertainment will not affect nearby properties. Staff had provided a summary analysis in the staff report with the modified condition if board recommend approval. The owner has the signature sheet of supporters, and he's also an attendant if you have any questions.
Anyone here for the Leaky Tiki would like to testify? Please state your name for the record.
Good morning, Board. My name is Gordon Stakowski. I'm the owner of Leaky Tiki Barbecue, 1821 Estero Boulevard. Okay, when we purchased the property back in June, I approached the city to ask if there was an entertainment license for Fort Myers Beach, and at that point I was told that there was no official entertainment permit or license needed for entertainment on Fort Myers Beach. So I pretty much left it at that, not realizing that there was a resolution that was passed in 1996. So 23 years ago, there was a resolution passed approving the patio, but not allowing live entertainment outside. So that's where the problem occurred, and when it was brought to the attention that we were in violation of the planning board, of the planning, we applied immediately an application to try to get that amended. We are a small business. We are not a big corporate franchise, national franchise, so we are hands-on, family-run, which means that we are interacting daily with all the neighbors and everybody in that area. I think that we've done an exceptional job there, especially over spring break. We did not do any type of entertainment or live music even inside of the restaurant, even though we were permitted, because after 30 years of experience in owning almost 40 restaurants in my past, I did not want to turn something that looks like we have a very nice restaurant that is family-oriented in the neighborhood and have any issues with entertainment in the evening with, let's say, a rowdier group. What we are offering to the neighborhood is live entertainment. We've had up to 2 musicians, and it is a happy hour crowd. It is 4 to 7, 5 to 8. By 9 o'clock, we've pretty much stopped with the music nightly. It is all local entertainment, people that live in the neighborhood. Most of them are acoustic, playing some fun music, fun beachy music. So I'm appealing to the board to take all of that into consideration, that again, we are hands-on, so if there was an issue with any of the neighbors, which we did have when we first did it, and I think we resolved whatever problems we had in the beginning immediately. There is a lot of the neighbors here in support today to support the Leaky Tiki with the outdoor live entertainment. Also, we are a very open concept. I mean, the board said that you've driven by or have been in there, you can tell that whether the music is inside or outside, the volume really isn't going to change anything. It's just the ambiance of the customers and the clientele that can enjoy some nice entertainment under that nice tiki hut that we built. So I don't think that the noise is a factor, and if it would be, we have no problem adjusting the noise level to make sure that we're good neighbors in that neighborhood. So.
Questions for the applicant or the town? Jane?
Other than that beginning incident which you brought up, have you had any calls on the music's too loud?
Oh, ma'am. We had 2 calls when we first started it. It was the neighbors right across the street, and I went and knocked on their door. They called me up, and I gave them my personal cell phone and my son's cell phone, who is the general manager there. And we adjusted it just a little bit of the noise level, and we have not had another issue since then.
Very good.
Question for the town. If this was discovered in December of 18, how are they still able to have music out there all the way through season and until 3 weeks ago, which is essentially roughly one spring?
I think they are in violation, and a case has been, an NOV, a notice of violation, has been filed against them in 2018 December.
That is correct. I'll add. The speaker, the owner of the business was cited, or the business was cited by code enforcement. The gentleman here speaking did appear before the special magistrate, I believe at last month's meeting?
It was about a month ago.
Yeah, and he was found to be in violation. And at that point in time, there was a discussion before the special magistrate as to what he could and he couldn't do, and he was advised at that point in time that under the code, until he followed through on this process, he could not have any additional music activity in the outside area, and since then, he at least advised the special magistrate that he would cease that activity immediately. As far as why it took that long, I can't speak. That would be a staff issue as to how long it takes. Sometimes code enforcement is slower than some people would like.
If I may, and we have stopped since the same day.
How many calls were made to the town and complaints? And was it the same person over and over? Was it multiple people, or do you have that data?
No, I'm going off of memory. I don't believe that the case came about as a result of a noise complaint. I believe that the case may have come about through just a site inspection by staff, but we can try and find that out for you if you give me a couple minutes.
Great.
Well, I also noticed that, it was discovered in 2018. You didn't even file your paperwork until February. I mean, there's still some gaps in time here, too, as well, that's, it's feeling like this was, in forgive me, I'm just trying to figure out if everyone's been properly notified and this was handled appropriately, that, he filed in February, but here we are now in May, after season, after everybody's left, everything of that sort, and now we're here. Does the process really take that kind of time? Almost 6 months?
Well,
Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah.
was just gonna say yes. I mean, you've got, I don't remember what the notice is, 30, 60 days for the code enforcement side of do something, come into compliance, do something, take an action. And yes, there was, no disrespect to there was a little slow on the application. He's also probably never done this process. So we sat down with him, walked him through the application. There's been some debate. I'm sure there's probably a little bit more time in there, but generally, yes, it's within the parameters of, unfortunately, how long it takes between staff reports and then noticing of the property owners within 500 feet and all that. I mean, there's 2 months there minimum.
When did that notification go out?
So it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we sent out letters per the code. Are you talking about the 500 feet notification?
Yes.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
And there's a sign, you've probably all seen the sign that's at the corner of the property notifying about the public hearing, this hearing today.
Okay.
Several questions and a clarification when we're done. You've spoken about the noise requirements and also you've talked about live entertainment is what you're looking for. In that live entertainment you spoke, and I've heard you speak about the acoustics. Is this just an acoustical system or is this going to be an amplified?
No, it is amplified, but the musicians and the entertainers predominantly are acoustic performers. But it is amplified with the speakers and with the microphone, so we need to make sure that that's clarified, yes.
Okay, so we are talking about amplified music as far as in this location?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jason, if you would, if memory serves me right, reading through all of this, there was a spot in here where it talked about the positioning of the speakers were supposed to be directed toward the water. Yeah. Could you tell me which water we're talking about, being we're on Estero Boulevard?
Gulf of Mexico,
So the speakers should be pointed, directed toward the street.
facing towards the
So,
Gulf of Mexico
From his location, speakers will be directed toward the street.
Right, remember you've got I think the idea was that you got the residential neighborhood the other way.
backside.
So
Well, I mean, you had
which
water
way do
on
you go?
both sides of the island, and it's
Yes,
kind of like,
I
okay,
understand.
which one are we looking at?
Right, so it's away from the residential neighborhood, I think is what the idea was.
Okay.
On that, if I may, on that particular point, the band currently faces, if you look at page 20 of the packet, the band, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, the band currently faces Lot C, and I wonder, so is the band currently facing the ocean, or it has not been? Because it sounds like that is not the case. Is that correct? Could you help me understand that?
Currently, the band is inside because obviously when we went to the violation board, they said that we were not allowed to have the music outside, so we moved the music to the inside.
But when it is outside,
The back was facing Estero, so they were
Yep.
playing towards the restaurant.
right, but that's my question, is it seems like if the back was facing Estero, then it really is shooting out towards the neighborhood, particularly the neighbors across from Ohio Avenue. I assume is that the person who complained about the noise across the street from Ohio originally?
It was a complaint when we first originally, like the first day, and that was taken care of immediately. And I have 14 signatures from Ohio Avenue of all the, especially the immediate neighbors, wanting that they're okay with everything.
I got
So
you.
it's not like we're doing something here that is disturbing the neighborhood. It's just the opposite. But also, I want the board to take into consideration that we're not amplified with, thousands of watts of speakers or anything like that. These are small, 250, 300 watt speakers, and we're there to make the restaurant a nice, happy place, not to scare anybody away with live, blaring music.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to understand what's happening. So assuming the band is allowed to play outside again, would it be better to have the band facing the bar itself as opposed to Lot C? Because wouldn't the building and the patrons then absorb the sound better and having instead of it shooting out over Ohio? I'm just asking.
Well, the Tiki Hut is pretty much secluded in, towards the building, obviously. So the way they were performing, they're shooting into the restaurant.
Yep.
So that would be absorbing all the sound. Doing it the opposite way, you're kind of like letting it,
No, it doesn't make sense to me to have it face the ocean. I get you. I'm with you on that.
I would agree with that.
But I was just saying, instead of it facing Lot C, it might be better if it's facing, if the back of the band is on Ohio Avenue, and then the band's facing the bar and the patrons inside. I'm just asking, do you think that would be helpful?
I don't think we had an issue prior, but I think that if that's what the board would like, I mean, we could tilt it 3 feet, angle it when it's, a little differently,
Yeah,
so.
shoot it towards the corner, yep.
I'd like to see the ladders, if we may. Is that appropriate?
So that's up to you. And I want to, can we pause on that
We'll
for
pause
John
on
to
that
get
till
back?
he
Because I
gets
would
back.
like him to answer part of that. I think it's going to ultimately be up to you and what you put the weight on that.
I think that would calm my concern about the idea that notice went out 2 weeks ago after season, after a whole lot of people have left the island who don't have a voice here, which is who we also represent here on the street.
Should have a copy of this.
Wait, you gotta wait until we
Oh,
get a
and
legal.
and in fairness for the record, we have not reviewed it for where do people live. I can't confirm or deny whether somebody lives in the neighborhood or out of town or whatever. So I don't know that. I assume whatever he presents will be good as word.
The reason I ask that is it's, a lot of times you get 15 complaints, it's the same person.
Sure, I understand.
So I kind of want to know where the genesis of these complaints are coming from.
The attorney's, I think, looking that up.
Okay.
And then I would
And
like
then-
him to comment before accepting or you discussing the,
If I may ask you,
Signatures.
sir, are you okay with the music being limited from 5 PM to 9 PM?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay.
Like I said to the board, if, we're permitted to have music inside till 2 in the morning if we wanted to. But we chose not to do that the whole season because we don't want to do that. We're very happy with what we have going on, and we don't want to have entertainment inside. Even though it's permitted, we never had anybody play past 10 PM. That was it. And that was like twice during the whole season.
Okay.
so to that point.
You're talking
when we
about
get there-
inside, but it's not really inside without any windows or walls.
But you still have multiple feet to dampen and
Right.
obstructions before you hit the street, at least if they're
I
inside.
mean,
you
it's
have
under
that.
a roof, but I'm making a point that, and I'm not being critical of the applicant here, but if, it seems to me that there's some defect in our ordinance when you can have live music inside, but you can have a wide open walls and it can be totally open to to the area,
You
so.
still have to comply with the noise ordinance at that
Yes,
point. the
that's true.
55 de-
That's true.
First, I answer your question, Madam Chair, why this case started and it's taken so long for the case to move forward. I just checked with code enforcement staff. Actually, when it started back in 2018, it did not start with this particular issue. It started with unpermitted work. And so there were a number of code cases and issues that were initiated back in 2018. And the current item that we're here to discuss was initiated in November of last year. And if my recollection serves me correct, in the month of November and in January, we did not have a special magistrate. So that also may have delayed the movement of this particular issue having moved forward. All the other violations, by the way, were addressed, taken care of, and have been closed out.
I guess my question also comes around the idea that, we identified this issue back in now November, did I just hear?
November.
And we're still allowed to continue until now, too, as well. Is this,
Again,
was that his choice?
no, that, I mean, well, let me, and I'm, again, paraphrasing. I believe that the owner, the gentleman, was given two choices: to apply for and come into compliance, or cease the operation. And he, again, there's a certain amount of voluntariness in the code compliance system, and I can't speak for the gentleman, but it, as it was presented to the code enforcement special magistrate, that the music activity was taking place and continued to take place beyond the date for compliance. And then during the hearing, the gentleman specifically asked, well, can I continue? And he was advised, no, you can't. That's the underlying violation.
We also asked, he has presented a series of letters from Ohio Avenue. They have not been checked to see if all those are residents of Ohio Avenue. Are we allowed to look at them?
You are allowed to consider them if you so choose. That is ultimately your decision. But the fact that they are not here today, they can't be verified, all would, at least in my opinion, as your attorney, goes to the issue of what weight and credibility you give that information. So, you know, it's in of itself, as the courts say, the term is, what probative value do you want to give it to? Because we can't cross-examine the witnesses or the people who said that, so you may give it 0 weight, even if you decide to accept it.
If I may, I think some of the neighbors that signed it are actually here, but the letter.
Different story.
Okay.
You know, those who are here obviously have an opportunity during the public hearing portion to come forward and say, I support or I don't support. But the list itself, in the absence of any verification, you take it for what it
Can I do
is.
a poll to see who's here from Ohio Avenue, just to see who would speak?
Ohio, Virginia, and
And that's my concern, and I think you were out of the room, is that this notification went out 2 weeks ago after a whole lot of these residents and folks have left the island. And I'd hate for them, you know, who we also represent, to come back to the island and go, how did this happen? And that's kind of why I'm trying to muddle through.
I would suggest to you in an abundance of caution that rather than a show of hands, even if it's just coming up, identifying them, saying, I support it, would be the more appropriate.
Well, I figured that they would come up and speak during public comment on this because they're allowed to. But the question is he's saying that there's people in this audience that have signatures on those, which would substantiate some of what his claim.
Well, what I would suggest is they come forward, you ask them, did you sign?
Okay.
And also, if I may, I would never forge a signature or an address. I mean, we walked up and down the street, and some of the neighbors were actually inside. We asked them, hey, will you sign this? And they read it, and if you need me to read this, I can. I mean, we would never, I mean,
Yes.
Let's go ahead and submit that, and let's see.
like me to read it? What it just says, it's a small sentence. All it says, 1821 Estero Boulevard had a resolution passed in 1996 not permitting music outside on the patio. That was 23 years ago. Obviously, the concept of the restaurant has changed for Leaky Tiki Barbecue. To be competitive, we are asking the city to allow us to have music, live entertainment from 4 p.m. till 10 p.m. 7 days a week. We would obey any noise restrictions that are placed. Also, just informal that there is no actual entertainment license on Fort Myers Beach. That's all it says, and that's 14 signatures from the street. So.
Can he take it out to the desk and get copies made for all of us?
We'll make sure, we'll get a copy.
Dropped one off yesterday.
All right.
Put their
Do we have
addresses on here
copies?
too as well.
We'll make copies of it.
Okay.
Want a copy?
Or they can take a look at it, either or. It's very quick.
Okay.
Questions?
Well, I have, is it appropriate to ask us staff? I mean,
Yeah.
is he still testifying or?
We're a spot where you can ask either side.
Well, I have a question about the determination of the staff that a limitation of 250 watts. Is there a relationship between wattage and decibels? I mean, the noise ordinance talks about decibels. I didn't know that. I didn't know watts.
Kelly,
Does that relate to loudness?
I don't know, and I don't think it entirely does. So that language is left over from their proposal, their requested language change. I advised the applicant that they should come up with some kind of measurement, something that makes it easier for code enforcement and for you to tell, or us to be able to tell as a town when they're in violation or they're not. We don't really have decibel meter levels, so it's a tough spot to be in. So he chose 250. That is the carryover from their submittal. If that number needs to be lower or somebody else has more expertise on that, we're more than welcome to listen to that, because I can't answer that.
Well, You know, and without any empirical evidence as to what 250 watts produces in terms of loudness, I feel not qualified to approve something that I don't have any understanding of the technical consequences of it.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
In absence of that, we don't
Yeah.
have a lot to measure either. So it was
Right.
one of those, which way do you go? But that is, again, if you're looking at page 18,
Yeah.
then that is recommended. It's basically taking his proposed language and adding to that. So I just want to make that clear, that page 14 is their suggested change, which is just a change in a sentence.
Right.
And then in further review of this, we took that sentence and obviously added on to it as a concern of making sure that it's a little bit more thorough.
I understand
And
that.
admittedly, the 250 to us, I don't know
Yeah.
what the results are.
If I may interact, sir? Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Green actually helped me through the procedure. It was very difficult to get this application put together, and he recommended to put in a certain wattage, and 250 is pretty much the smallest speaker you can purchase. Your car speaker is about 100, so it's a very minimal sound system. Again, reason being is we're not trying to do an outdoor rock venue here. We're trying to do happy hour music that is not that loud. And I understand the city's situation about the noise, but again, there is no ordinance or law on Fort Myers Beach enforcing a decibel, where they can say, okay, it's up to 70 decibels, and then, well, here they come and measure it, and they say, well, you're over the decibel meter. So there is no ordinance. But again, we would take all that into consideration, that we would not try to be above any, other cities do have decibel meter ordinances, and I know what those are. So I could, try to gauge it to be below any other decibel.
We have a decimal
We
order.
do have a
We do
decibel,
have
we
one.
do have a decibel ordinance.
From 7 to 10 p.m. is 72 decibels. From 10 p.m. to 7
Yes.
a.m. is 65.
Well, then how about that? Let's just enforce that.
Well,
See, that's easy.
well, I think it would be better to have it related to our noise ordinance rather than a 250. How does a code enforcement person know that a amplifier sitting on a pole is 250 watts? I mean, or 200 or 500 or what?
When I was filling out this application, I was not aware that there's a decibel ordinance. I have no problem with that, because 72 decibels is, believe it or not, pretty loud.
In response to the question that was asked about does wattage translate into loudness, for lack of a better, I Googled the question. Literally, I did. Does wattage of speakers matter? That was the item. The first thing that came up, that was a tip from or not a tip, a comment page from a technical place that specializes in speakers. And when it comes to volume, many musicians only consider the amplifier's power of wattage rating, and in general, more watts does mean louder. But it then goes on to explain that there's differences, and but I think the issue that staff has is the ability of code enforcement to go in, identify the speaker, even if it is up on the wall. And generally, if I understand, the speakers have, on the outside and the rear, their wattage. So we would be able to identify whether or not those are 250 or 500 watt speakers. And obviously, if they're not 250, then they would be in violation of their condition of approval. What code enforcement doesn't have is a noise meter to take a decibel reading. The sheriff's office has that, and on many instances, it has in the past when residents have complained to the town about noise violations, and that complaint has been relayed to the sheriff's office. The response is that the on-site officers who are here do not have the meter in their possession. It kind of gets parceled out, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You have to be properly trained, et cetera. So the idea here was to identify wattage that could be reasonably ascertained by a code enforcement officer, as opposed to having to call the sheriff and determining whether or not that whoever's on call actually has the meter in their possession, are trained in it, it's calibrated, et cetera. So that is how this particular condition came about.
That was a very good explanation, and I certainly assumed that the more wattage meant more noise if it related to loudness, but we still don't know how many decibels 250 watts produces, or is that, you know?
Depends on the volume. Depends on the volume. I mean, if you have it cranked down low.
Cranked up or cranked down?
2.
Well, I would strike that part of the application then and not have the actual wattage of speakers. Let's just go by the ordinance that the town has already in place, and then we'll follow whatever the town has already set.
I'm looking at,
Council has pointed out a very significant thing. We have that ordinance, but the sheriff basically is the one that we rely on for enforcement of that ordinance. And we don't, our staff does not have the meters, the noise meters.
Correct.
But this is one way for us to
Yeah.
control that piece.
so what happens if you book a band that you don't know, or a performer, and he shows up, he lugs his 300-watt speakers out of his car?
Well, that's why let's strike that part and let's use the decibel meter part.
It's going to be a mess.
Yes, you do by the volume. So if you have a 500-watt speaker, if you put it on 3, it's the same as if you put it on 6 on a 250-watt.
I don't know, Dan, would you not agree that we're not in the code
To some
enforcement
degree,
business?
Whatever the numbers are. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're not in the code enforcement business. I mean, we set the rules and the conditions. How they're enforced, that's not our problem. I mean, if we have an ordinance on the books, the town, the sheriff, they need to figure out how to enforce it, not us.
Is code enforcement asking for this 250 watt just to make life easy?
No, so the conversation was, we have, as staff, have a difficult time enforcing the existing ordinance, which I think has been a conversation with the council too, if I'm not mistaken, because we don't have those meter readers and not trained and all that. My advice to the applicant was, since we're unable to specifically enforce that, you may want to consider some other measurement so that's more clean and clear to the public of something that we can do. That was the only advice. Again, I didn't suggest the 250. I have no idea about wattage. So no, that does not come from anything other than my recommendation personally to him was, we have a hard time with code enforcement when things aren't specific, and we get blamed a lot of times not enforcing things when they're not specific. So I'm recommending if you have a way to measure and show to the public and to us, then it'd be easier for us. It doesn't solve the problem, admittedly, because I don't know what 250 does. But again, that's why we modified the proposed condition to include both, is hopefully it covers both on the, only his testimony of those are the smallest speakers you can get. If I don't want to, paraphrasing, I don't want to take the words out of his mouth, but if that's the only basis of, I have any idea of what kind of relationship that sound has to a concert. Otherwise, I have no experience with that. And we did not recommend the 250.
So can I move to strike the 250 and just put in the decibel? Whatever the town's ordinance is?
No.
That's up to us.
That's up to us.
Oh, okay.
That's
you-
correct.
But if
You
that's
cannot.
what you want, let us know.
I got it.
You have any questions for him?
Just to follow up on that point, I'm no audiophile, but I do think Mr. Safford's correct. If somebody brings out a wattage that is higher but doesn't turn it up, sometimes those higher wattage speakers are higher quality speakers, and they just don't use the full capacity, and it gives a better sound. So I would lean towards taking that out as well, because I think it's breaking new ground here that I don't think we should break.
I concur.
Tim?
And I also
any
think the
questions?
speakers should be faced inside, not,
Yes, I think,
Upstairs.
I just took a look at that language, it says all speakers must be oriented towards the water. I think we should change that to all speakers must be pointed towards the inside bar away from the adjacent residential properties. I think that'd be helpful.
Tim?
Well, that was kind of going with it, because on page 40, with looking at where you have the illustration based on the live entertainment, I take it that's going to be the stage. there's a 12-foot setback, that if you had, according to this ordinance, speakers facing the Gulf, that anybody walking up and down the street would get pretty much blasted. But I also have another question for you. I mean, you have mentioned the fact that you had the ability to have music inside.
Correct.
And the reason for moving it outside as opposed to leaving it inside, which would pretty much give this a moot point, why would you want to move it outside?
Well, the ambiance of everything. We're on Fort Myers Beach. I mean, it's a tiki hut. I mean, indoor and outdoor is night and day. I mean,
So people sitting at the tiki hut can't hear the music if it's played inside.
correct.
I'm good.
Any other questions of the town or the applicant? All right, I'm going to open it up to public comment then. Anybody here to speak on behalf of, for or against, just want to do public comment on this matter? Please step up to the microphone, state your name for the record.
My name is Stephen Martin, and I have a unique perspective on this because it's my neighborhood and it's my livelihood. My wife Lori and I live in the neighborhood really close to the building.
Address, please.
158 Miramar Street, thank you. And I want to thank you all for your service to our community, our lovely beach community. As far as the wattage goes, I just have to mention that. Trying to relate wattage to volume is like trying to relate horsepower to speed. You know, you just drive slower, that's all. So, anyway, it's my neighborhood and it's my livelihood. It's my unique perspective. We've been musicians living and working on the beach for over 20 years. We like the neighborhood to be nice, and we are entertainers.
And you're for? I'm not giving you exact time.
I'm for the music outside. In my case, we're so amenable to cooperating with any kind of ordinance, volume, ask us to turn down, we turn down. I have another technical thing. I have an amplifier, it's got a switch on it. I can switch it to half a watt, 50 watts, or 100 watts. So trying to not be, an audio engineer and, think like that's going to be very confusing because these things change all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody else like to speak? Please come up to the microphone, state your name. You can sit down if you would like.
My name's Mark Duke. I'm new to the neighborhood.
Name again?
Mark Duke. And I've been around for like 6 months, and I just like to say I love this community. It's awesome. It's an awesome place. The music is amazing here, and I think that's what makes Fort Myers unique, is all the entertainers that are here, and I think that's the big draw for people too. And it's an energy field that just brings a lot of happiness and excitement. And at the Tiki, we've always been really careful about the volume of our music, and we've always faced those speakers towards the building, away from all residential areas, straight towards the building. And that's pretty much the way the stage is set up now. And I just want to speak one little thing onto the wattage thing. The wattage has nothing to do with volume. It's the decibels, it's the volume knob. Wattage actually makes clarity, and it actually creates better sound, just like he was saying. He had a little bit of insight on that. And so you could have a 1,000-watt speaker. It just brings smoother, better sound. And but the volume knob is the key. And all we have to do is just keep that volume, at a happy, safe level. Work with our community, and if our community has any complaints, we adjust it and we just work with them. Because, we're part of this community, and it's part of us. So we don't want to make any unhappy people. We're here to make people happy. And so far, I think, this place is a pretty happy place.
You work there?
Yes. guess that's all I have to say. Thank you for your guys' time.
Thank you for speaking. Anyone else like to? Were you? She's, the public comment, did it have to be sworn in or just, or they testify? She wasn't here for swearing in.
Oh, well, we'll swear in right now.
Okay,
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Witness is sworn.
Thank you.
Go ahead, speak your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Susan Stroud. I'm at 238 Miramar Street. I've been there since the 70s, and I just wanted to say that the Leaky Tiki has really brought a great ambiance to our neighborhood. We do not have any concerns in my part of the neighborhood with any noise violations, or they're always done by 9, 10 o'clock, and it's just been a wonderful addition to have this entertainment and this wonderful venue on Estero, right up the street. Thank you.
Thank you. State your name for the record.
Good morning. My name's Maureen Egan. I live at 240 Virginia. I'm legally blind, and the Leaky Tiki is the place I can walk to. And it's wonderful. It's not too loud. And I don't know if you have the means to check the neighborhood, but I think you'll find that a majority of the homes around it are rentals. And there's not anybody set there. Also, there is an app on your phone that you can pull up decibels. That's all.
Thank you. Come over here.
My name's Dave Lay. I live at 1920 Bayview Drive, which is only 2 properties removed from the Leaky Tiki. My wife and I are in favor of having live entertainment at Leaky Tiki. However, it is definitely facing a residential neighborhood, and it needs to be considered, or the sound level coming out of that property needs to be considered as a residential area. Now, Gordon, we met the first week or so that they had up and running, and as he'll probably acknowledge, the levels of the sound coming out of the property were pretty loud. We live there half the time, we rent it half the time. So it's, yeah, there are some rental properties there. We do rent ours quite a bit, but I can tell you firsthand, the living in the house, when we hear the loud noise coming from that property, it's an issue. But we did, the first week or so that we were there, we walked over and talked to Gordon directly, my wife and I. He's immediately reacted, he responded, he turned the sound down. We walked back to our house, which is only 150 feet away. He came back and asked, is that sound level appropriate now? And he said, yes, it's perfectly fine. Now, you have to realize these residential areas and these single-family homes that are rented in the area have sound producing on their own. You know, we have in our property, we have a sound system in our yard. We got a Bose 140-watt system. We turn it up to 50%, which would be roughly 70 watts per channel, and it's plenty loud for our property. Our property is privately fenced, so we can keep the sound contained. And, you know, we've had cases where either, well, actually not myself, but the renters have come in and turned it up too loud. So we get complaints. I don't know that the town has ever come back to me and said we've had complaints on the property, but it's possible that that can happen. So I think it's a case of being respectful to neighbors. This is not like Hoosiers in Paradise where you're completely facing the street. This is actually facing the residential neighborhood. Now, I'll mention I have not received a 2-week notice. 2 weeks ago about 500 feet notification. I don't know what addresses you mailed these to, but I haven't received it.
On your tax bill.
On the tax bill? That's the address it was mailed to?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's an Ohio address. So,
Yeah.
State of Ohio address, so I don't know how long it would take to get it. It is a rental property. It could have been sent to my rental information address as well. I don't know if that was considered. So anyway, basically we're in favor of it. I would just say some suggestions. I have a privacy fence. We have Bose speakers pointing in, 70 watt per channel. I don't know if it's possible, but why couldn't they put a sound partition on Ohio Street and have the singers basically right behind that panel pointing in? It would help keep that sound from propagating across Ohio to my neighbor, the 3-story house right there over to mine, which is right next to his. Something to consider. Basically, I think that's it, and unless you have some questions for me, because I am local there, I can tell you the lay of the land.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. Were you the neighbor then that originally complained and that he gave, when he approached you and gave you his personal cell phone number?
I don't know sequence or chronology of who called who, and we actually walked over. We didn't call anybody. What we do is we try to deal with issues face to face, and that's what we did. We walked over and talked to Goran, and he responded immediately.
And is it correct that he gave you his personal cell phone number to call him whenever there's a problem? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate your time. Anyone else?
Thank you. My name is Becky Kratt, and I'm a long-term resident of Fort Myers Beach. I've grown up here, so I know it when it was a quiet location, and I've seen many changes. I did move away during my military service, and I moved back to the island over 20 years ago and have resided at my residence of 120 Miramar. I'm also here to represent the property owner at 122 Miramar, who's not able to be here, but we had called in and verified that I could speak on her behalf as well, and that is Lovell Larkin. I wanted to say that I disagree with the comments that were made, but what I'd like first is, could I get some clarification on the time frames? Because I heard between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. and 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. as far as the noise ordinance goes.
Condition says to 9.
Well, the town's noise ordinance goes till 10, so somebody can have a party at their house, and the ordinance drops down after 10 p.m. Well, one of the conditions here is 5 to 9
Okay,
that we're
thank
discussing.
you. I did want to wish them, congratulations on their success of their business, because they have been able to make a location that typically hasn't been successful, profitable for themselves. I've had several occasions that I've had to call, and I've taken the opportunity to give a courtesy to the restaurant first, and this is for music volumes over 10 p.m. When I've called, I've given the comment of like, wow, your place really sounds like it's rocking. And whoever answered the phone said, yeah, man, we sure are. I said, how long do you plan to keep going like this? As long as we possibly can. And I said, well, I'm a resident across the street here, and there's a noise ordinance that you're in violation of. And they said, okay, we'll turn the music down. Well, about 20 minutes later, the music is still rocking. And I called back again. And at which time they said, okay, we'll turn it down then. Also, through several of the comments that I've heard made, that's been kind of a theme as well. When we're told that the music is loud, or when we're asked to turn it down, we do. So, there's non-compliance to whether the volume level is turned or whatever the wattage is. So I've had to call, and I've tried to be courteous as well to let them know that, hey, the volume is going past 10 p.m. on several occasions. I've also taken the opportunity to call code enforcement, and I was quite surprised when they did answer the phone, actually about 10:30 p.m., and I got a live person to speak with. We've also called the police because we've been told about the volume as well, that the decibels and the reading, that it's the police that have to do that. So we've had several occasions that it's been there. And again, I'm relatively close to the area, and I do believe my rights to a quiet neighborhood are being violated and infringed upon with this outside music. I hadn't been a patron of the location, but I did take the opportunity once I received my notice to go to the restaurant itself. We did sit on the outside bar area, and the music was inside, and we could hear it just fine from that location. We did also notice that the past few weeks, and I didn't realize it was because of this ordinance, that when they moved the music inside, it did seem to quiet down. I mean, my first thought was maybe because spring break is over and they've quieted down, but they had a live band going in there, and it seemed to be just fine. Again, there's been this general creep into the residential neighborhood of noises and volume. Leaky Tiki, and I know this isn't the venue for it, but their trash cans are also a problem that we've had with vultures. I've heard some of the comments from maybe some of the performers saying, hey, when Gordon is away, the musicians turn it up. So it does seem like he does try to keep people in time. But again, I am a proponent of live music, and I think I've seen several of these people at various venues as well. So, with that said, I think a fair compromise is the music inside. It doesn't seem to be an issue, and I've sat outside as well.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
For her?
Yes. First of all, thank you for your service to our country. And second of all, would you support if the LPA today restricted any live music at 9:00 p.m.? Would you support that, or would you still be uncomfortable with it?
If the music is inside,
No,
I
if
support it.
it's outside, if it's but we
Outside,
limit it till no live music after 9:00.
No, I don't support that. I don't feel that the music outside is necessary. It does travel and carry throughout the town. I'm not sure if it's just the way that the buildings are faced or however that is. But I have walked past there several times, and people are congregating on the streets and stuff like that around that corner of Ohio Street at various hours because of maybe the music is there, the band is there, and it's encouraging a little bit more street. What I've seemed to have noticed is when the music has been outside, the crowd gets a bit rowdier as well. And again, maybe it's a spring break crowd, but the audience volume, I guess, is a little bit louder as well. And I haven't noticed that in the past few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for her. Could you kind of roughly tell us how far away exactly is your home on Miramar from the?
I would say it's kitty corner to the back side of their building. So they've got like their trash cans out back, and my property is kitty corner to them.
What?
Across from the hardware store.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? Please approach.
Morning, everybody. I'm Ron Daniels. It's a wide open question about the sound. In perspective, if I'm talking here, you can hear me. Here, you can't hear me as much. You're standing.
No, you have to talk in the microphone.
You're standing, you're standing in one location or seated in one location, it's different. Fort Myers Beach is a thriving community. The north part of the beach is the entertainment district. People go there for food, fun, the beach. And I've been on the south side of the beach. It's very, very quiet after 7 o'clock. I live in Cape Coral. It's really quiet after 8 o'clock. No live music really has taken place at the Leaky Tiki that I know of beyond 9 o'clock. But after hours music is played through a system after that hour. And when everybody leaves the beach and the traffic is off the beach, every noise is amplified so much more. How are you going to control somebody going down the road with 2,000 watts of amplification in a pickup truck with his windows rolled down? We all know during spring break this kind of things happen. So the beach does get quieter at night, and so every sound of any kind, whether it be people talking, you can't measure decibels just by the music. Because if you have 100 people in the room, that brings the decibel level up. If you have just somebody playing acoustically through an amplified system and no traffic on the street going by, which also adds to the decibel level. So you've got a lot of different factors here. But all in all, I think the outside music and the inside music there doesn't have as much of a bearing. The outside tiki that Gordon built made that place congruent to the feel of Fort Myers Beach. It's an outside community. People come to the beach not to be inside. They want to be outside. If you have, Becky, if you're in a property that is close to something like that, that's part of that lifestyle there on the beach. I mean, if you want to live on Pine Island somewhere in Bokeelia, by 7 o'clock you hear crickets. North side of the beach, you're going to hear a little bit more lively because people go down there. But I think with the traffic noise, and we have to take spring break into consideration and all those other factors, the compliance of decibel level, like Gordon said, that's reasonable and that's great. After 10 o'clock, the outside music that is piped through a jukebox certainly can be controlled, and and then it's in compliance to the decibel level of the beach community. I still don't think it's that loud, because I've pulled out of that parking lot, after those hours, and the background music, I can barely hear it. Once I turn the corner on Estero Boulevard, you can't hardly even hear it. So it's just a matter of your fine-tuned, tolerance to something. You could have 100 people eat in a restaurant, and one person complains, and that's what
Please
all
wrap
the
it up,
folks.
sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Three-minute limit.
Oh, okay. That's the focus. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Good morning. My name is Mindy, and I'm here on the behalf of an owner of a vacation rental home. And I'm just going to read the letter he wanted me to read for y'all.
Where's
What
it
is
from?
name?
Name?
Name of the owner is Paul G. and Karen E. Nelson,
What address?
67 Miramar Street.
Thank you.
Esteemed members of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency, please accept this letter through our authorized agent, a representative of Tri-Power Vacation Rentals, as testimony regarding the public hearing of the request for 1821 Estero Boulevard Outdoor Live Entertainment Special Exception. We are the owners of 67 Miramar Street, which is located west of Estero Boulevard and within 500 feet of the above-mentioned property. We rent our 4-bedroom home to family groups throughout the entire year. We have received complaints this year from renters who have been disturbed by loud music that emanates from the Leaky Tiki Barbecue establishment as late as 1 a.m. We have also received complaints of loud music, using foul and abusive language, who are patrons of the Leaky Tiki Barbecue in the early morning hours as well. The music and voices can not only be heard from our driveway, patio, decks, and pool, but in our home with the windows closed. We were at our home this past January and witnessed this ourselves, so the complaints of our renters were verified and justified. While we are pro-small business and want this conveniently located restaurant and lively bar to succeed, we also must protect our renters and our investment property from unwelcome nuisances and intrusions. We are about equidistance from the beach pub, located directly on the beach off Avenue E and I Street, and have never encountered a problem with live music after the traditional quiet hours of 10 p.m. We therefore feel that 1821 Estero Boulevard should be held to the same standards and observe the noise ordinance, especially if they are in a residential area and affect both residents and visitors to this beautiful island. Thank you for your consideration. Paul G. and Karen E. Nelson, owners of 67 Miramar Street. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Please approach.
Fraser Weaver, and I am been going to the Leaky Tiki since they opened, and I've only been on the island since September. I live right off here, Tropical Shore, so it doesn't affect me. But I'm pro for it to go back outside. I think the ambience of it is very good, and I think it coming to the island has helped a lot with where it's located. There's not really anything there of that nature, and with I've been in there a lot as in a patron, and having it outside, you can hear it better, like in the tiki part. Yes, if you're sitting at the bar, you can hear it from the inside, but when you're in the tiki area, you can't really hear it too well from the inside. And that's where a lot of patrons sit, because they enjoy the outside. And so I do respect, it sounds like they're willing to turn things down in the volume, but, there's other places on the island that have, not live bands, but they have jukeboxes and stuff that are just as loud that late at night, so that I've patronized also. So I'm for it moving back outside. Thank you.
Anyone else? Additional you've had your time to speak.
I would just remind the board that the application before you sets forth the criteria which you're to review the application. I know you heard a lot of comments regarding from the residents, some in favor, some in opposition. But to the extent that those individuals spoke, you need to keep those comments in the context of what the review criteria are.
Yes, just to Becky here, our neighbor, I had no idea. That was never brought to my attention. Also, I can guarantee you 1,000,000%, we've never had music past 10 o'clock. So 1 in the morning, that's just not correct. None of the musicians play past 9. We've had one band that played twice over the whole season up till 10 o'clock because it was just, that's what we ended up doing with them. But I have no problem with the 9 p.m. I have no problem with the 72 decibel. Again, we're a small business. We employ about 30 full-time employees. We're not here to be a burden. We want to be an asset to the city. And any of the neighbors that do have a problem, I will give them my personal cell phone. They could call me at any given time, and I assure you that there will not be any problems. And if there is, obviously that's why we have the sheriff's department to come in. Eventually, if it is an issue, I'm assuming the city has the right to take away that permit. So.
Madam Chair, just one last question. In the interest of compromise, do you plan on doing this 7 nights a week, or would you be open to restricting what nights you could have live music?
No, sir. 7 days. It's a happy hour. We're not looking to do till 7, 8 o'clock till 10 p.m. It's usually 4 to 7, 5 to 8. And again, this is people coming off the beach, having a burger and a beer, watching some good music.
Again, in the interest of compromise, would you be willing to restrict then your hours till 8 o'clock, or do you need to go to 9 o'clock?
Well, we've already restricted it from 10 to 9, so.
Right, but you just mentioned your happy hours until 8 o'clock. I'm just trying to find a compromise here. Is that important for you to be open till 9, or is 8 o'clock okay?
9 p.m., sir.
And you need to do it 7 nights a week?
Yes, sir. We're open 7 nights a week. We open 10 in the morning. I mean, we're 7.
No,
we're
I
not
get you.
open.
A lot of places don't have live music on Tuesday or Monday nights. I just was curious. You're pretty firm on 7 nights a week?
Yes, sir. We don't close. I mean, we're
No, I
open.
didn't mean close, but some places are still open, but they just don't have live music on those.
Right. I mean, that'd be like not having food or beer or a TV. I mean.
Okay. Just asking.
Also, you keep saying 4 to 8 or 5 to 9. In the application, it is 5 to 9. So you can.
9 p.m. then.
But 5 is the starting
Sure.
hour. Okay, so
Yes.
4 isn't the issue. Okay.
You got to remember that sunset's at 5:30 in the wintertime. So you'd have music starting at 5 o'clock.
Well, I didn't take that into consideration, but yes, I mean, over the winter, we were at sunset, there's nobody there. So, and it's pretty hot. So that's why we've kind of done it 4 to 8, 4 to 9, 5 to 9. I mean.
5 to 9. If this passes the way it is, you get 5 to 9.
Perfect.
Okay.
We can live with that.
You sure?
Yes, sir.
You sure? Town, have anything else to add?
So I just want to kind of bring this back to the center, right? The context. Remember, this is an amendment to the special exception of conditions, and the special exception was for consumption on premise. I'm not advocating one way or the other. The point of it being here is because there's specifically a condition that prohibited these actions. So that's why the way we've presented it, that's why it is the way that we've presented it, because we're not in the business of finding a way to recommending a change to something that another commission or council and LPA has made before. So, so as you said, when we get into the discussion, I think there's some terminology here dealing with the 12 feet. and some other things that we might need to clean up depending on the direction that you go. So I just want to reserve the ability to have that conversation with you to modify some of these conditions other than just the time.
So you want to discuss this now? these
When you're ready for
modifications?
discussion,
Yes,
I don't
which will
want
be
to
after
skip
this.
over, I don't want to just deal with the time issue and the wattage issue. I think there's other things that we can clean
Right,
up
right.
related to that. I just want to bring that to your attention and make sure we didn't skip over that.
Okay.
'Cause I don't think the applicant understands the 12 feet either, that and in the discussions, that is going to be a problem for that. So let's come back to that when you start your discussions.
One last question for the owner, again, in the interest of compromise. It sounds like you do have the capability to have live music inside. It's not as preferable. I was wondering, obviously your bigger crowds are going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. Would you be willing to compromise and have the music inside on those off busy nights, the Sunday through Wednesday, and then outside on Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Would that be a fair compromise, or would that still cause you hardship?
It would definitely cause hardship. I mean, now off-season, we might not even have entertainment for the next 4 months. Who knows what we'll do, but we should not be restricted, let's say, in season, whether it's a Monday night or a Saturday night, it doesn't matter. It's the same amount of people. So to not be able to, have the entertainment outside would definitely jeopardize the success of the business. They're just going to go somewhere else where they can listen to music outside. I mean, it's that simple.
Okay, that's fair, but just to try to answer Mr. Smith's question again, the difference of having the music inside, sitting in the outside tiki area versus outside tiki area, I mean, are you saying that people outside can't hear the band if it plays on the inside of the restaurant?
Well, it's just not hearing it. It's entertainment. A band, they talk, they joke around. It's different when this room is, let's say, the outside tiki hut, and I'm playing here to the people that are outside and are involved more than just to the volume and to the listening of the music. And it's different if there's a person playing 20 feet from here, inside over there. I mean, the people outside are abandoned pretty much from the entertainment.
I'm just trying to get it, but you didn't clarify that very well. I'm just trying to get some more clarification. Thank you. Okay.
I did clarify or I did not?
No, you did now, but when he
Okay.
asked the question, you didn't really give him a lot of detail. I was just curious. That's helpful. Okay.
Other questions? Okay, that will close the discussion portion and the testimony portion of this hearing. You can have a seat.
Thank you.
And opens our discussion amongst us, which sounds like we've got quite a bit to discuss. So we're good with the 5 to 9. The applicant's good with the 5 to 9. Now, what was your concern about the 12 feet?
Well, the way the condition is stated is I think part of the goal is to try to create conditions that define orientation and where it goes. So right now, the way number 4 is drafted is the 5 to 9 must be located at least 12 feet from the front property line. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands the difference between the street and the property line, because that's usually a common mistake. So that 12 feet from the property line, I think they're trying to tuck it in next to the property line or at the edge of the outdoor patio, which is pretty close to the property line. So that may restrict his location. So if it's something you're entertaining to do, you may want to reconsider that 12 feet
So you're
to be a
saying-
smaller amount.
So what this condition, this 12-foot condition, it's going to move, from looking at this diagram, it's
Inside
going to
the-
move it considerably down Ohio, more or less.
Right.
Towards the
Right. So
restaurant.
So they
it comes down to a
you
question
can't
of,
you can't tuck it in that little corner like they've been doing up till now.
probably not, right. So it comes down to a question if your interest is orientation more so than distance, then I think that needs to be addressed.
My personal preference is orientation, shooting that more into the restaurant than moving it down Ohio, which anyone else, I mean, this is about our thoughts on this one versus, because right now what he's saying is that what he's saying from right now is that right now you're tucking it right against that railing, which is real close to that property line. If this passes the way, or the condition is going to move further down Ohio on your patio.
But that actually, your point's well taken, but that actually might be advantageous depending on how the speakers are pointed. If they're pointed directly towards the bar inside the restaurant, that might actually be quieter
Soft
for the
too.
for the neighborhood than it would be if it was up against the sidewalk on the front of the street. Because it's more secluded in there, it's more tucked into the restaurant itself. And I think that actually, having looked at it the other day, I think it might be actually more helpful, even though it's a little bit closer to the neighborhood. It's more ensconced within the body of the restaurant. I think that could be helpful. Again, I'm not a sound engineer, but I think it could be helpful.
But it would force more of the orientation into the
Yes,
bar
exactly.
and not down the street.
Yep.
So perhaps to that point, maybe it's a difference in the distance from a stero, right? And then, or the orientation, like you said, facing directly the restaurant versus at an angle. I think we need to be pretty specific about that, whatever your choice is.
I don't know how you would qualify that, Jason, but if you still had that restriction from the property line, it would force it in. And again, I think the language just needs to read, all speakers must be pointed towards the inside of the bar away from adjacent residential properties on page 18,
Conditions.
under conditions.
All right, so just to go back to that point, because of the way that it says front, there's two fronts, unfortunately. So I think I think what you're saying is slide it further up Ohio, but orient it towards the restaurant. Okay.
Well, it looks like he has, from the diagram, he has the 12 feet there. There's parking and everything there that he has. So it wouldn't be, so the 12 feet on the
Middle of the
Ohio
deck.
side, he's fine.
Right.
Right.
We're pretty much the only one
Yep.
that's of concern is that Estero, the way
Correct.
this is oriented.
Correct. So it would slide it essentially, well, I say that, no. So if you look at, which one are you looking at? If you look at 20, the survey doesn't show the tiki bar, right? So it's a little bit misleading where that brick area and that wood deck is where the tiki bar is now.
Yes.
Okay, so the corner down there where it's got the angle of the Ohio, that is essentially where they're I think a little bit in from that is where they're placing, so that would not be 12 feet from either of those lines. So if they slid it up towards the middle, right, of Ohio, maybe it's the distance from, I think it's more orientation. I don't think you have a concern, right, of being near a stero. It's more of the facing the building all the time.
Sliding it down Ohio a little bit gets them an orientation considerably more towards the building than it tucked in that corner, which is going to shoot this way.
Right, I don't think the 12 feet is as important as the orientation.
The 12 feet helps force the orientation.
And I think the 12 feet will push it away from Ohio to be in the middle of the tiki bar.
But you've got, wait,
Why does it push it away from Ohio when it's referring to it being 12 feet from the,
It technically has two fronts.
it has,
So
12 feet from the
from the front
property
which
line?
is,
Why does that push it away from Ohio?
it's got two fronts. It's got
on
two
two
streets.
streets,
Don't you
Ohio
have-
and Estero.
Don't you have a little more room, though, on Ohio, though, because of
The parking lot.
the parking lot?
That's why I wish
Got
we
at least
had
9
I wish we had the survey of where the tiki bar comes out to.
Because you have, what, 9 feet for the parking lot? for
I'm
parking
looking
space.
at page
And
Do, so,
40.
he's not- We're close on
I
testimony.
believe so let me look at that.
Time
real
out.
quick.
In an effort to assist you in reaching the language of the conditions, it is, if you
Appropriate,
so
you can
wish, you can
Call him up if you
call
need.
him up and ask him for questions or input that may assist you in finalizing your recommendations.
We'll call you on discussions.
Okay, so
So-
to that point, I'll look at to see, because I think the way the tiki bar is built, the tiki,
Yeah.
cheeky tiki, whatever it is built, it's very close to the actual property line, not the street, not the parking, but it's up against the property line. So,
Well,
wait a
I'm
minute,
looking
in
at
the
page 40, Jason, and it isn't up against the property line. It's, the tiki bar looks like it's set back, if that's a correct representation.
and that's a great point. I think if we could ask the applicant to confirm on that
Yes.
page, that walkway that you see
Yeah.
on page 40, as you point
Right.
out, is outside of the tiki bar, because I can't remember from memory. If it is, then it's an accurate representation of where it is.
So
Yes,
the
the-
walkway is on the outside of the.
Correct.
Okay.
So the property line on Ohio to the Tiki Hut alone is probably 20 feet. No matter where you put the, stage inside, there's way more than 12 feet. It's probably double that. So you have the end of the tiki hut, the patio, then you have like a 4-foot sidewalk, and that's all on our property. And then you still have the parking spot, which is probably 15, 20, I don't know how long his parking spot is, but it's definitely over 20
Minimum
feet.
9, minimum 9. Okay,
That looks like it'll fit inside there then.
then it will. All right.
It'll just be 12 feet shifted up away from Estero, I think, to,
That's the only
your
one
point.
that's really where it's predicated is
Yep.
on Estero. The Ohio side, because of the parking lot, which has to be on their property, covered by that, so.
And again, I apologize, but I couldn't remember where the tiki extended out towards Ohio, whether it covered that walkway or was inside of it, so.
And it looks like from our survey on page 40 that the property corner falls in the concrete, that this isn't going to shift it a whole lot, maybe a few feet from the looks of this.
Right.
If this survey is correct on page 40.
Well, remember-
The shift we're talking about is just a few feet.
That is a survey with hand drawn over top of it, so just, that's why my question about the location of that's not necessarily a scaled,
Scale.
specific representation of what was built, that was used to build it, essentially. So that's why I don't 100% rely on that part of it. But in reference to your point, if it's inside that walkway, then it gives you the distance based on the other survey.
Question, Jason. Where does the 12 feet come from? What dictates that?
The intent was to do what we're talking about, I think, is to
Okay.
slide it up a
No,
little
no,
bit.
I understand.
so, yeah.
But
I
somehow we
came up
had
with
to
the 12
get
feet.
a determination of 12 feet. Where did that come from?
The applicant came up with the 12 feet.
Okay.
So that's.
I just came up with that number. I figured that's about 12 feet away from the sidewalk, and I mean, I didn't take a tape measure, but we can move it over a foot here or there.
But to the owner, you see what we're trying to accomplish. We would like to see the sound focused toward the inside of your facility. And when I was there on Sunday, one of the bartenders, he was very helpful, but he suggested that some of the appeal is to have this sound go outside the restaurant so it draws people in. We'd probably like less of that, obviously, and have it be focused on your customers.
Our tender was incorrect, but we definitely have no problem tilting the speakers facing the building. And I would agree with the board that that would definitely damper a lot of the sound.
Mr. Smith, just to answer that question thoroughly, staff was trying to encourage the applicant to be more specific and be clear about where it was, so when we got to this discussion, we could be a little bit more specific and detail it out versus, is it anywhere underneath the tiki hut?
Well,
Is
that
it
was the whole
anywhere on
thing
the
as far as
property?
Why is it 12 feet? Why can't it be 15 feet? Or why can't it be 9 feet? I mean, that's.
Now that we're
the whole thing.
discussing it, it can
Everybody's Sitting here
Wait a
betting
minute,
on
you have the
12
right
feet.
to make a recommendation.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
To him or me? Tim, please speak closer. I mean, it's red.
It's red,
Please bring it closer to your mouth. She's struggling. Sorry, guys, we have to put all of this on record, so it has to be recorded back there.
So as with most of this, it was a beginning point of discussion for the not knowing. Again, it was prohibited before, so it's a little bit new ground. So where do you want this, and where is the public okay with, and where are you okay with? That was ultimately, it was a starting point from the applicant.
Well, that was the whole thing as far as, because all of our conversation was really predicated on the 12 feet, but and what I was looking for, what is the legality of the 12 feet? If it's not a ordinance somewhere, then it's an arbitrary number that.
It is an arbitrary number in an effort to be specific about where.
Okay.
Is it a manner or means to get your approval, essentially, is what it is.
It is not an arbitrary number.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay, it is a number that is being discussed here to provide for having some precise determination as to where the music is going to be, how far it's set aside from the property line, so the impacts upon the neighbors is potentially reduced, et cetera. It's up for your consideration and discussion as to where within this property the music activity is going to take place. And the recommendation that has come forward to you based upon the input of the applicant is 12 feet from that particular demarcation line is where it's being proposed. And so
We can discuss more.
I would urge you all, to consider it in that context, and not that it's some number arbitrary, because while there is some give and take, at the end of the day, it's where is this going to be? And so that would be my suggestion as you move forward, is take it for what it is, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as arbitrary.
We have the right to discuss more if you, or make a
Yeah.
recommendation or suggestion for more. if to be. It's a changeable
That's
number.
correct.
Request to make a change to line 4, that it say, must be located at least 12 feet from the Estero corner going along Ohio.
About the Estero property line, not corner. That's very specific.
Estero property line, and it just says at least, so he could put it further to the back or whatever, but it must be at least 12 feet from the front.
Well, you know, if I could interrupt, if this survey on page 40 is correct, 12 feet wouldn't even put it into the tiki hut area.
Well, 12 feet,
It's at least 12 feet from the property line to the tiki, to where the brick is. So I mean,
Would you like to see more?
well, I don't see any point in saying it's just 12 feet because it
No, it says
isn't
at
even in the
least.
tiki area at 12 feet. It doesn't look like to me. I mean, if we had some dimensions, it would be helpful here. But if you're looking on page 40,
Is there, in discussion, is there some other way to accomplish what we're trying to do, which
yeah,
we're ultimately trying to move this in and
I
orient it towards the bar more, less towards Ohio and Miramar, and protect both the citizens and also give you the right to do music, but
Right.
also balance the two.
I got it. So why don't we just say at least 3 or 4 feet under the tiki hut going east of Estero? So
that makes more sense.
Because that's ultimately the goal, is to get
Yes.
this orientation more towards the bar.
I'd relate it to the tiki
less
hut
down the street.
itself and not the property line. I think because we don't really have the dimensions. If we
Yeah.
had the dimensions, we're, I don't know, we're talking about something we don't really know for sure.
is there any access points along the Ohio side of the tiki? Okay.
no, there's not. It's just
So-
landscaping and like a knee wall.
So how about we say 1/3 of the way back from the tiki? From the Estero Boulevard?
Well, I'm trying to see if we
Right,
just
so I
don't
think
get rid
there's a roof line of
Mm-hmm.
an existing structure that, I think that's a demarcation that can be measured from, and if it's set inside of that line. So if it's at or 3 feet or 4 feet or whatever the number, that is something that somebody can stand out there and measure from.
I think 3 feet inside the demarcation line of the
I'll change my recommendation. The outdoor live entertainment is limited to 5 to 9 and must be located at least 3 feet from the Estero roof line.
Why don't you just say 3 feet from all roof line, edge of roof lines? That way, I mean, you're starting to in some ways, in some ways, we're going to go out there with a tape measure and make sure it's 3 feet from Estero, but not 3 feet from this side. I mean, we're creating a nightmare. I mean, just make it 3 feet from
the
roof
tiki roof line.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So you just move it in.
I'm good with that.
And could we put a proviso in that says the entertainment will always be facing directly at the tiki bar? Is that a best way to say that?
While they're performing, if they have to turn around and do something, I mean,
The restaurant,
At
the
least
tiki,
the
the
sound
tiki
is
bar is the
oriented.
rest. It's
yes,
parallel to-
speakers facing the restaurant, the stage, minimum 3 feet under the roof line. Again, we can tweak it as needed, but a minimum of 3 feet. And then the speakers and the entertainment facing the actual facility.
That is accomplishing what we're trying to do here, which is protect the residents behind the place that kind of contain some of this noise, allow for a little bit out on Estero to pull people in, and kind of, and make sure, do our best to
you could argue that when you had the band outside before it was prohibited. You could argue that it was facing the restaurant, but that's not what we're trying to do. We want to have it
No,
move
it
around.
wasn't. It was facing, actually, the back was on a stero.
Right.
It was facing the opposite way.
We want to do the complete opposite of
I
that. Okay.
completely understand what you're trying to do, and
All right.
yes.
All right. Fair enough. So make sure we got that. Yes.
To add that to the bottom of 3 is instead of towards the water, we change that to towards the restaurant.
If I may, just a point of order in the conditions. Staff drafted the conditions, I think essentially mirroring what the prior resolution and approval was. But from a practical standpoint, I would suggest that you take number 4 and actually make it number 3, and we would delete the first sentence in 3, which would now become 4. So it would read 1 and 2 unchanged. Number 3 would now say outdoor live entertainment is limited from the hours, because we're now saying it is allowed. And the conditions of that live outdoor entertainment would start at the sentence that currently reads the location, subject to your modifications. So we would remove live outdoor entertainment, music and/or any type of outdoor speakers are prohibited after 9 p.m. And any speakers over 250 watts are always prohibited. We'd eliminate that altogether because that's covered in 4, which now become 3, saying that you can't.
Then put in the decibel meter.
Well, the decibel meter, the noise ordinance is already there.
That's what I'm saying. So
You
we
don't
wouldn't
need
have
to-
to even
you don't
put that
have
in
to-
there
yeah.
because it's already
Yeah,
there.
it's already out there.
So eliminate this
Correct. Yes.
and
Madam Chair, I make a motion to move what the general counsel just stated.
Well, I have
Whoa.
I have something else, okay?
You forgot about El Ocho here.
Yeah,
Number 8.
yeah, number 8.
Sorry.
I generally don't favor a specific penalty provision
Singling out one organization.
on an individual property. We have general provisions for penalty in the Land Development Code, and I don't think they should, I think we should follow, that should just apply. And rather than having, every time we have a variation or a exception, having a penalty provision in that, versus the general provisions that exist in the Land Development Code, I think is a much more preferable way to deal with that.
So strike 8.
May I make a suggestion? I don't necessarily disagree.
Yeah.
What I would recommend that the violation language be revised subject to your approval is generally just simply saying a violation of any of these conditions shall result in the revocation, the automatic revocation of this resolution. So that ultimately is what we're trying to achieve, is that they comply with these conditions that allow him to have the outdoor music.
If it doesn't comply, it goes away.
It goes away.
Yeah. That's kind of
One
even
time,
extreme,
one
too.
strike, you're out?
That's,
If the special magistrate finds that they're in violation, I
would-
mean,
I
that's,
Look, if he's out of town and a bartender that doesn't know any better cranks up the music a little bit, and I don't want her to get mad, but nobody's perfect.
If the special magistrate makes a determination that there was a violation of the conditions of the noise ordinance, then that would be the violation. They've provided an opportunity to be noticed that there was a violation, an opportunity to be heard, and ultimately a determination by an independent special magistrate has determined that a violation did occur in the future.
I'm in disagreement of that.
All right.
Only because, if it's fair for his restaurant, it's fair for the next restaurant. We're trying to create some uniformity here in the code, and if the single amount, I think to have him pulled away. I see what you're saying, and I get it, but at the same time, we have a noise ordinance to handle this.
I apologize for not making myself clear. I believe that should be a standard condition for all approvals moving forward, because that provides an additional mechanism for enforcement. That's, so, you know,
But is that better handled through a resolution of, say, noise ordinance versus this, than it's handled across the board for anybody who violates that noise ordinance?
if you all don't, if there's not the appropriate comfort level for you all as a body to have that language or any violation language and just default as the discussion is to what's already in the town code, that's perfectly okay. I'm all right with that.
Jason, what is already in the town code? Isn't it $100 to bring into compliance, and then after going to magistrate, they can apply a higher fine?
There's different steps, and John can answer this specifically probably, but I just want to, I have to get on the record, as you always do every time we have this conversation, and it's the town manager's discussion about this. They're asking for something specific and special approval from you. They're also, in this case, asking for something that was specifically prohibited by previous councils. You've already asked why it takes so long, 6 months of time and staff effort to deal with these issues. So every time we talk about this issue, I'm going to say the same thing, which is this is what helps keep people into compliance. I know you don't like it. I know you want a different dollar amount, but this is the enforcement that is best for us to, as a staff, to get people to stay into compliance. It keeps them into compliance.
It's also the difference between bankrupting somebody and bringing them into compliance, because if it takes 6 months to get an answer from the town, it's the difference between $500 a day times 6 months or $100 a day times 6 months.
It did not take 6 months for them to get an answer from the town.
yes,
It's taken
it
them,
can.
no, it's taken them 6 months to go
Been
through the
there on the other side.
process because of
He had every
multiple
option to
reasons.
stop when it was.
He did. And and anybody that violates something, ultimately, if they're in violation, accrues those fines of those days. So yes, he could have been fined $500 a day over this time, or he could have stopped.
You're saying number 8, just to paraphrase, is the quid pro quo. You've come in front of us to ask us for a change, and in return, we want something else, which is a higher fine should you not be in
I'm just
compliance.
expressing the reason why that's there every time, despite I understand your objections. You're going to keep seeing it every time until instructed otherwise. But I'm just trying to remind everybody why the reasoning why we say that we put that down there.
Maybe our fee structure needs to be looked at
Yes.
rather than
that's
in
an
each
ongoing
individual
conversation.
case.
Well, and I think there's a difference between, sometimes there's a difference between somebody doing something and then being out of compliance, and then a specific application requesting something. And I would even put this at a higher level than some of the other original applications, because this was already decided. I know it's 22 years ago, but it was for some reason under COP, they said no outdoor music, no amplified music. So it's a change in direction from that.
Meaning they didn't have an outdoor setting.
I'm sorry? No, it was.
Didn't have an outdoor setting back then.
They did. It was for the
Yeah, they
outdoor
did.
seating, and it was
That's
for
how
the
they got it.
consumption on premise to expand into the outdoor area. So that's why that was on there originally. It was a concern then, if it's a less concern now. But again, the staff puts that in there every single time because it's the carrot, hammer, whichever one you want to call it, because of the amount of time that it takes for us to enforce these.
I mean, we can always strike it, and if council
Yes.
wants to, they can put it back in. I mean, it is a condition.
Yes.
Well, I'm definitely opposed to penalty provision in individual zoning cases. Code enforcement people, they have a code. They have our land development code, and they have building codes and so forth. They don't have copies of every resolution that we adopt. And if we start setting separate penalty provisions in individual cases, it's a nightmare for code enforcement, in my view. And I like the alternative that's presented by council, that just a violation, make it very simple. Violation results in revocation of what we're permitting.
You like the new idea that he put in, the new wording.
But that should be across the board. It should be in our codes, not in individual. Nobody else has this on their
prior to
restaurant.
Well, I'm saying the penal provisions
Yeah.
should be the penal provisions as set forth in the land development code that are general to everyone and not specific to individual properties.
Is that not, this 1427, isn't that section 1427 already in our code, page 59? Page 59 at the bottom. Any person in violation be guilty of a second-degree misdemeanor and subject to fines not exceeding $500 or imprisonment, county jail for a period exceeding 60 days. I mean, I think that's.
Well, that's the noise, you're looking at the noise ordinance.
Yeah.
Well, but
But this
isn't
would
that
fall
what
under
we're
noise ordinance.
looking
Yeah.
at? I mean, it's already here.
Well, that may not be the only thing that they violate, at any given time,
Well,
But we're only
It's-
dealing with noise.
yeah.
this is,
Relates to the
It's already
special
here.
exception, yeah. It relates
so
to
I
the
don't think
special
we need to
exception.
add another fine. And I mean, here it says fine not to exceed
If the
$500,
violation
it must
happens to
be
be a
$500
violation
day.
of the noise ordinance, then the noise ordinance would apply. If it's some other violation.
Of
that-
another condition.
Of another condition, the general provisions of the Land Development
Sure,
Code would apply.
follow. So we don't
And
need to
and
add
it
that.
would not be needed here in what we're doing today.
Exactly.
I think we just talked in a circle that we're all on this pretty much same page.
Or-
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. So did somebody take a note on 3 to 4, crossing out?
We'll make, if you, as it moves forward, we'll make those changes to the staff recommendation.
Okay. General discussion for us, we're 8, get rid of 8, okay.
Well, I like the idea of, if you wanted to leave, I'm okay with getting rid of 8 entirely, but I'm also okay with just saying a violation will result in revocation of the permitted use.
That's not on anybody else's, so I think that
What did
that
town-
could be an overall thing that we do to the fines and conditions of penalties instead of just doing it to one place.
Well, I think if we're starting to put this in all of them instead of the $500, I think we'd be more comfortable getting things through than having to address the same clause every time of the $500 a day. So if we want, I'm
okay
I'm
with
fine
transferring
putting it in this case, and then looking towards the code to changing the code to match it.
I still think that there needs to be more study on it because like was brought up with Scott, that it could easily be a one-person thing that can take a business down. And I think,
Who can actually rule to revoke this? Only the magistrate could rule to revoke this if he's in violation?
No. In fact, the special magistrate doesn't have the authority to revoke. The only thing that the special magistrate has the authority under state law is to issue an order finding that a property owner or operator is in violation of whatever section of the code that they've been cited for, order them to come into compliance to cease whatever that may be. In some instances, the only remedy may be ceasing the offending activity, or otherwise, if they don't come into compliance with the time specified, to order a fine. A potential authority to revoke a development approval rests initially, and I'd have to check on, it may be different depending upon the type of approval issued, initially this body and then ultimately the town council, unless I do know a lot of jurisdictions that do provide within the code or within the resolution approving development orders or applications the language I just mentioned, or similar language to that, says that if you're not in compliance with the terms and conditions of your approval, you're in violation of it, and the approvals therefore become void.
But back to what Scott's saying, though, and I'm trying to, and I'm sure this question is, who has the right to say, who has the authority in the town? Is it the town manager? Do they have to come back in front of us to revoke this? This is also to protect him if we put this in here. If he's in violation,
Well,
who makes the final determination he's in violation and revokes this, rescinds this?
That would be, as the explanation is this, if they're in violation of any of these conditions, they would be issued either a citation or what's called a notice of violation by code enforcement staff. They would be given an opportunity, just as they were prior, to appear before the special magistrate and make any arguments that they are or they're not, or hear the reasons why we weren't in compliance. And then if the special magistrate finds that they're in violation, the language in the resolution would be self-effectuating.
So essentially, if he goes through the process, special magistrate does agree that he is in violation of this, then that's when that clause would kick in.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
So it's
how I.
not arbitrarily,
No, there's.
it comes into the office and somebody goes, okay, he's in violation.
Yeah, no.
I mean, there's an enforcement process to follow that, obviously,
Correct,
but.
and there's
that's different.
notice and opportunity to be heard. It's not being done on a whim or arbitrarily, as that term has been used already.
We have things in place in our LDC already, so I think that we should just follow what we're asking everybody else to follow.
Opinions
I don't
on
think a
this?
poison pill should be part of the condition. I mean,
Got a
that- that's-
dynamic where if a band is excited and does an encore, you could literally lose all this privilege, and which hopefully would incent the owner to maybe stop the band at 8:45 in case they do an encore, but at the same time, that's a poison pill that would be pretty dramatic, I think.
Comes down to, is it a poison pill for, and we're discussing it in this stance, but is it something that we want to put into all of these ordinances and do it across the board?
That's where we
I think
change
that's,
the.
excuse me, I think that's, when we have a joint meeting with the town council and with staff, I think that's where we bring this issue up. I think today, I don't want to go down a road that we haven't gone down before and putting a poison pill in an application. And, Jason, I totally understand why the town manager is putting this in here. There has to be some type of enforcement, but I think we all need to come to an agreement how we do that. Because it's painfully obvious, we don't like it, and he does, and that's okay. It's an item I think we need to have further discussion on.
Absolutely, and I don't think I disagree with your statements. I think we just see it as a difference when it's an application asking for something different than what's normally in the land development code. He could go all day long and just do what's prescribed and allowed in the code, and those would apply.
Right.
Consumption on premise and the outdoor music is not. So that's why we see that as a little bit different. We're not doing this to other permits or the things that are doing the by right uses through the code that they subscribe underneath the normal code provisions. So that's the difference that we see, and that's obviously for future discussion.
This time we strike it and
I concur.
send it on. Okay.
But if it's my understanding that, if I understand correctly, a violation, absent paragraph 8, a violation could result in revocation anyway, under existing procedures and code.
It could.
So I'm
We have-
satisfied with you. I think I would be satisfied with eliminating 8 entirely then.
Oh. Are we right? Are we good with the
And
changes?
this is why we had the one item.
Okay. So why what?
Yeah, we had the one item for you.
It's a good one, too. It's a big
Yes.
one. One that, deserves the care and consideration that we've given it. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll again move the language discussed by council. In addition, we would strike Section 8 from the staff suggested proposal. If council would restate that for the record, that would be helpful.
You have to say, is that a motion?
That's a motion. I moved.
You have to say that it meets all the conditions for approval.
With changes.
It meets all the conditions for approval with changes. This is an amendment to special exception. Conditions 1 through now 6, yes.
I'll
So
second
moved.
that motion.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All against, say nay. Motion passes 6-0.
May I? Well, thank you so much, and Thank you for taking all the consideration, and we will not disappoint the board. All this talking about live music made me thirsty, so.
Discussion
remember,
with the bartenders,
You
I think.
discuss it here, we beat it up here, so it's less than council.
So for the publics, just before June 3rd is I believe is the scheduled council meeting.
So you'll see council June 3rd.
Have a good discussion with your bartenders.
Be a good neighbor.
To give your cell phone number to that neighbor right there. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, no, you
No,
shouldn't.
You need to get his cell phone number.
Yep.
But it's now restricted to 9 o'clock. Okay, can we take let's take a 5-minute break.
And get warm.
So meet back here at 11:15. We're adjourned for 5 minutes. Let's get rolling.
This packet, this whole packet isn't, this whole packet. I've heard now from people.
Oh, well, you know what, let's go through this. We got a town attorney someplace. I'm sure you can hear me out there. All right. I'm going to call the LPA meeting back into order at 11:19. Jane. We can go afterwards. All right, so we're going to open recess as the local planning agency. Do I hear a motion? And open as the Historic Preservation Board.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are now the Historic Preservation Board, and I will turn it over to Mr. Safford.
Yes, we did not have a meeting last month. We did not have a quorum. We're going to have a meeting this month, fourth Tuesday, 9 a.m. here. On our agenda today are two, let's see.
We have, starting with the historic determination
Yeah,
for
we
214.
have two historic terminations. The first is 214 to 216 Pearl Street. Is there a representative from that property here? Okay, well, we'll proceed. The structure was built in 1946, remodeled in 2009. Structure meets criteria for CHI-2. The structure is on its original site. It was built as a private residence, and today it's still there on the same property, serving the same purpose. The structure is wood framing, pine piling, vinyl drop siding over wood framing, gable hip with sheet metal, double hung windows, and slash pine floor interior, which is really cool. The applicant indicated no association with important events or people, and there were no actual artifacts found on this site. In your packet, you'll see the application and the historical structure form from the Florida Master Site File. After reviewing the application, it does qualify, I believe, for CHI-2, which is historic recognition. Do we have any comments?
Adorable.
Well done.
Yeah.
I have no questions or comments. I read through the packet.
So,
And have you visited this house?
I have. I've seen it.
And inside it?
I just think is this the one where they found
No, that's the second one.
the second one? Okay.
So it's built right after World War II, so that's pretty cool. I don't know who the original people that moved in, but I'm sure they were involved in the war. So I'd like to, would somebody make a motion to?
I'll move to approve the 214, 216 Pearl Street for the Historical District Determination, CH12, CH13, or?
Oh, CHI-2.
CHI-2.
I.
Only one of
Sorry.
them.
So there's
CHI.
3 levels. Four is, 2 is recognition, 3 is historical importance, and 4 is just
We're doing.
Interest.
We're doing
interest.
CHI 2.
Right.
Okay, I motion to approve the property 214, 216 Pearl Street for historical district determination CHI 2.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay. Our second case is HDD 2019-0035. The applicant is Bonnie McLaughlin from 261 Fairweather Lane. Would a representative from that property be here? Okay. She is not. This property, according to the applicant, the structure was built in 1950 and has not been remodeled to date. Town record shows that a permit for re-roofing was requested in 2016. The structure, however, was moved from its original place. The subject property was built as a seasonal home, is now used as a home year-round. The structure is wood framing, foundation is pine piling. Some obviously have been replaced with cement piling. The exterior siding is board and batten. The roof is pitch gable end. The windows are double hung windows. And again, the interior is slash floor pine, original kitchen sink in 1930s lights fixtures. The applicant indicated there's no association with important people or events. However, an arrowhead was found on this site, and that is in our packet as well. And it was my determination that this does fall within our guidelines of being over 50 years old. Actually, her letter, she says that so this is not correct. She actually thinks that the house was built in the 20s or 30s, and when the tax rolls came on in the 50s, that's when it first came up.
Well, it could have been marked as in the 50s when it was moved to its current location.
Right.
And that's when it became effective.
Yeah, that's kind of like our building at the Gypsy was built in the 20s, they think, and when it moved to its current location on 1698 Estero, that's when it became on the records in 1950. So,
And she has no record of where it was moved from?
no.
That's too bad.
Dan, have you been in this house?
In the house? Not that I'm aware of.
I knew she kept going to the oldest person on the board.
But I don't know. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to find an arrowhead and stick it under my house.
There you go. Well, I think it's great that she has come before to get it designated, and I think that the house is probably older than 1950s.
We can't put on the plaque, though, unless we know for sure. So the plaque will actually say 1950.
So do we do any requests from Lee County to see if they have any history on the properties before we move forward on anything?
We don't, but the applicant can.
Okay.
So the applicant can look
So-
on it.
Is the applicant fine with a plaque saying 1950?
That's.
All we can do.
It's all we can do.
Unless she wants to go do more research.
Right. It was the same thing with our property. We couldn't determine exactly when the structure was built, so.
These were probably old fishing cottages that, were built onto the front with porches and the back with porches, and then later filled in as living spaces. So I move to, anybody else have anything?
Scott, the significance of the Arrowhead
Pull
find.
that closer.
It's red. The significance of the Arrowhead find and the property that the house is located right now, not where it was originally located, has what to do with this house?
Well, I think it has to do with the property it's located on. So not only is the house historical, but the property it's been moved to is also.
Okay, so the house is historical based on when it was built, but the property is historical based on the fact an arrowhead was found there.
I think that's just an added bonus.
So, yeah, you have, when you do master site file research and all that, you have two designations, really. You have the structure or structures, and you have the property itself. So there's archaeological and could be historical significance of a property. You could identify properties that so-and-so that founded the town lived or was born at, right? You see a lot of that, presidential figures. The structure itself is what you're dealing with the designation, and right now you're really just giving it the age for recognition of that. When you get to the CHI 1, then it's got some real ramifications and I guess how sometimes benefits and sometimes not related to it. But
tougher.
so yeah, so I appreciate the conversation about the difference between the two, because you do have between the 3 and the 4, as Scott was mentioning, there's properties that you could designate, there's structures that you can designate as these as significant, and then this one I think you're kind of doing both, is what it sounds like. But you're right, not necessarily that they're tied together because it was probably moved, but.
You could actually on this side do CH4 and CH2, but I think it's cleaner just to do a CH2 and have the added.
But I think to the point, maybe include in your motion or just recognition of the property and the structure as CH2. That way, if in the future ever becomes, because I've been through this with the master site file stuff where the property was, but the building wasn't, so the building was okay to be demolished, but then the property had limitations on what could be built on it. So I think recognition of both is relevant.
Do we want to bring this back in front of us, or can we do a motion that?
I just include the structure and the property because of its arrowhead significance. If you want to do that, that's fine. And
So is that still CHI2?
Yeah, I think you just leave it at that for simplicity.
It's recognition.
Because they'd have to go through the more formal process for CHI1.
Right, so.
Yeah, way more.
Right, and you wouldn't, correct. And you don't need to duplicate the process for the property because of an arrowhead. It's still, you're just identifying it as a cultural resource of significance.
I move to approve the property located at 261 Fairweather Lane for historical, why do I keep saying that? Historic
recognition.
District determination of CHI2, category of the historical importance. And the value of the land.
Recognize the land as a CHI2 as well.
Historical age of the, what was it, age of the structure, significance of the
50
structure
years.
and the property.
Right, and the property.
Land and property. Second,
I
anybody?
second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone
Anyone opposed?
Well, I'd have just
Oh.
a general question. We're not going to be approving every property that's just because it's 50 years old, I hope.
Right now.
We'll have 2/3 of the town that'll have a plaque on their wall.
Well, I think that this one, in this case, is clearly from the 20s, not the 50s. Like, my house is from the 50s, 60s, and it's clearly not worthy of historic recognition, any historic recognition. But in these cases,
So to answer your question, Dan, then we have to have a further discussion when such a property is presented to us. But right now, the criteria is 50 years.
Well, so can I jump in?
Well,
if you don't
my
mind?
house is 50 years old.
no,
It's
we-
60 years, 70
has
years
to
old,
meet some of the
and it is not, has no historical
we-
significance in my view,
I think
we
to your
do have a series
except
of,
that I'm there.
Yes.
in our comprehensive plan, there is a series of minimums that they have to meet in order to get each one of these for this determination. So I can't come up in front of the board because of my house is over 50 years old, and it's a cinder block house, and it has no, architectural
Right.
significance, no historical.
Nor does mine.
But there is in the comprehensive plan a specific criteria for
And
each
Dan,
level.
you fit that criteria.
Your house may not.
I think you
You're,
should,
you're ancient and you're worthy of designation.
Well, I didn't recall that was the only criteria. I thought there had to be something unique about the property
Well,
besides.
there are standards of the roof line, there are different other.
Yeah.
It's in the comprehensive plan, but it is up
Styles.
to the historic advisory committee to review that and bring it before us.
That's one of the things we're going to discuss this month is 50 just all you need? You're going to need more. So one thing I'd like to add to this is these two applications were a result of of Betty Simpson and Lori Wolf's presentation at the library. So the word is getting out. So it's exciting that we got some applications in, and they were filled out correctly.
And we're good. We took a vote on this. That was just an additional comment. Okay.
Motion to adjourn from the Preservation Board and reconvene as the LPA?
can I interrupt and pause for a
yeah.
second? Do you want to talk about your schedule this summer? Because I'm going to bring that up for the LPA too. And I didn't want to leave this. So
HC.
July, I'm going to have the same conversation with you as an LPA about July, June, July, and August. Do you have anything? You said next month you're planning on meeting?
This month, May.
This month, May. So do you know June or July if there's a plan?
Right now, we think we have a quorum for June, but I think we're going to take July off.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. There's a motion on the table.
I second it. All in favor? Or
Aye.
Aye. We're now back as the LPA, and we're moving along to member items. Tim, do you have anything?
In last month's meeting, where we had a meeting with town council, was there any final decisions made during those meetings that I
There
missed?
was some consensus on changes and interpretations that they're supposed to be bringing to us at some point in time.
had discussions about different things as far as side setbacks and front setbacks and height limitations but I just, wondering.
Jason, do you have an update on that?
Oh, yeah, we got it all finished? No. Yeah, so we're working diligently on that and have a couple of them in draft form and looking to hopefully, I think August, we're going to look at June. You may have a busy schedule in June, so for the code changes, definitely by August, have several of those brought before you.
So we stood.
Our goal is to utilize, actually, no, let me, I think there's one that we're going to have in your schedule in June, at least one of them. I think the pool height issue that we talked about, that everybody was in agreement on, when it meets a principal structure setback versus an accessory structure setback. I think that's been fully drafted and ready to go for your June meeting, but the others will follow shortly after August, some of them.
Okay.
Just wanted to briefly thank the Cultural Resource Advisory Board, who had a leadership conference on May 2nd and 3rd, which I had the privilege of attending. It was chaired by Bill Veach, and then their committee did a great job. We heard from leaders from throughout the island. We toured all historic and significant sites on the island. Our own Scott Safford presented before the leadership conference, and it was well attended and extremely interesting and helpful for those who want to get more involved in the community. So I just wanted to thank those involved. That's all I've got. Thank you.
I guess once again, I am just kind of stymied by 71 cases. Is this unusual, going in front of the magistrate?
The vast majority of the cases relate to violation of the short-term rental regulations. About 60 of those cases. And they just happen to be all initiated and moved forward all at the same time.
How many cases do you normally see?
Anywhere between 30 and 60, probably.
Jason, I would like to get a number on what kind of fees we've collected from violations and enforcement. Say, go back 2 years. Can we get that for the next meeting?
You want the
What kind
amount
of-
that the town has collected in fees?
Fees from violation fees.
Okay.
Just curious if it's, I have to think that it's quite monumental. I mean, I've only went to one and it was quite high, so I am interested in knowing the amount of money that is collected every year from the residents.
I said, there's a significant difference between the orders that are imposed
I
and ultimately
understand.
what the town collects in the way of fines. In some instances, a number of the property owners avail themselves of language in the code, specific provision in the code that allows them to request a reduction in the accrued fines. And we do, I would say, probably every other month have a number of those come before the town council, and sometimes the town council, based upon the criteria, determines it's appropriate to reduce them, in some instances not.
Should that be handled here or with a public records request?
I'll try to track it down, but things like that, I'd prefer to be through a public records request, frankly, but I'm happy to try to get that for you.
Whichever way you want me to.
I mean, I don't know, I can't guarantee I'm going to get everything you're looking for, because I think you know more than I understand what you're looking for, but we'll see what we can do.
But I think that would make a public records request for that would make it more,
Okay, I'll make a public records request.
more
I'll
official
help you
request for that information than.
Expedite that, yes. I generally don't have that information at my disposal, so.
No.
I want to thank all the volunteers and all the restaurants that participated in Taste of the Beach. It was a great event.
I had said that I would attend the last week's meeting of the town council on behalf of the LPA. I dutifully attended. I wasn't asked any questions, and the committee I guess they rotate the committee that are technically the chairman has to make a report to, and that was CellCab. So I sat quietly in the audience and kept my mouth shut for a change. And had no comments, and they didn't ask me any questions. But I have something else I'd like to bring up, and that the Tiki Leaky situation reminded me of a concern I've had over the years on the ability of the town staff and the capabilities to follow up on conditions that we attached in granting variations and exceptions and sometimes land development orders that are buried in these resolutions that are adopted. And code enforcement, of course, doesn't have copies of those, to my knowledge, as distinguished from them having, as I pointed out before, a building code or a land development code that's specific to or general to violations. An example would be some years ago when I was mayor, the Snug Harbor was torn down, and they built because they weren't allowed to renovate it over the submerged land lease that they had. So they rebuilt a new Snug Harbor, which is now Nervous Nellies. Okay, and one of the conditions there was that there be a pedestrian capability of an easement along the waterfront, so that you would come from like the parking lot area over towards Matanzas, and you could walk straight. You could stay on the waterfront and go all the way over to old San Carlos, that property, and that was a condition in that grant in that approval of the Snug Harbor restaurant. It turns out that that never happened, and it got blocked off. And then when there was a recent, they had some recent action on that property in which that was revived, and it was discovered that they had put a fence there and it closed it off. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. And my question, I guess, is how does the staff have any record of all these different conditions and so forth that we're attaching to over the years? Who keeps track of them, and how do we prevent that sort of thing from happening?
So we try to, historically the towns try to keep records in multiple places, which is probably to their detriment at sometimes. So we have address folders, we had a previous program called Track It, and now we have iWork that we attach these things and try to carry them forward. So like this application you had before you today, whatever the resolution that gets signed with the conditions, that'll be attached to that file. So hopefully that keeps it on the record. We've tried to migrate all code enforcement, building services, and planning services essentially into one place for research. That was part of the reason of going to iWork, was to try to make it easier to find these things. But historically, they've been generally in the same area. Code enforcement does have access to those documents. They research the same places that I would have to research if you asked me about a 1996 approval. I would say that one of the examples you pointed out was a little bit different in, it's not a typical code enforcement activity. Music timing and location of a building would be, but maybe that easement, there's probably some easements that have been granted or things that have been asked for on those development sides that have not been followed up on. So it's really imperative on the planning department and building department, community development as a whole, to try to enforce that. But you're correct. I mean, some of those things, if somebody comes in for a fence permit and somebody didn't look for that restriction, then maybe they granted that permit for that fence, and that resulted in being blocked off. You'll probably heard me say it 1,000 times, and I'll always say it is specifics and clarity. Sometimes after the fact we realize maybe it wasn't as clear, but at this point, doing this, try to be as specific and clear as possible. is always helpful to us.
But I think to his point, though, we have no place that you can just simply go,
Yeah.
you have any question, go and see all the exceptions and conditions for a particular property
Absolutely.
very easily.
Absolutely. It's
Other than
address.
digging deep into these different resolutions.
They're,
saying you're
they're
attaching a
all address-based.
Mhm.
Everything we do is address-based, parcel-based. So every condition, every approval for a project is attached to that address.
But is it attached as in a listing, or is the physical document scanned and attached, and you have to research down into each individual document, is what I guess is.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, you have to open the document and read it. I mean, it's not, somebody doesn't take those conditions and then move it to the front. I always say,
And
well,
hence why something
you-
from 23 years ago
if
gets
you want,
missed.
if you want my name at the top of your phone list and you put an A next to it, but then you want the next person's phone, you can't put an A next to everybody's name to get them to the top of your phone list, right? So I see that all the time in our file management system. Somebody puts a 1 next to it, so it goes to the top.
But
Well,
I kinda
next thing you know, I
disagree.
got 12 files that have a 1 next to them.
But
You
being
got to
some-
dig and look for it.
But seeing somebody who writes software, software that has listed exceptions and such for other projects and stuff of that sort, there's no place in our new software that we've paid for that where, as a property owner, as a resident, as a person, could just simply go in and say, hey, okay, here's all the exceptions and conditions that have been applied to my property without digging into 25 deep documents. This is what I'm asking.
There's 25 deep documents for every property, so you have to look through them. But yes, they're all address-based. They're attached to that address. And the part of the point to the software that we were looking for is on a screenshot, a visual, somebody's just looking and scanning for things. Hopefully it does a better job of showing you that there's other things attached. So if code enforcement's looking for zoning approvals or special exceptions or other documents or approvals of some type, we're trying to get it in a better showing, more visible, easier to find, to look in a certain place. And that's what we've tried to do with the current software. But it's always also attached to the address folders, which is another place that we have it. I can't say that the files have always gone to 3 places. That's it's been onerous for some people, but yeah, they're all address-based.
I don't think anyone's concerned about having it in 3 places, just one convenient place to see it all.
Well, unfortunately, over time, there's been 2 or 3 different techniques and management systems that have been done. We're unfortunately carrying forward all of those at this point, but it's all address-based,
So
so.
where would, if somebody's new coming to this town and they want to come in and buy, let's just say that since we've had this property, 1821 Estero, what site would they go in to put that address in to get the history of the property?
I believe historically, they've always been able to go into Track It online.
E-Track It.
E-Track It, and search for the different things that have been attached to that property, whether it's code enforcement actions, what the results of that were, special exceptions, rezonings, any application, whether it was failed or not failed, building permits was all tied to that. And any other software we've looked at generally tries to do the same thing.
Does this only go back to since we became a town?
Some files have county records. Over time, we've tried to pull those out. My understanding is they've tried to do research, and when you do research on a site, and if you can get something from the county, then I tell the staff
Attach
all
it.
the time, attach it. Any information we can find, attach it. But the county doesn't have a lot of information sometimes, so it depends on the site.
Well, that's addressing people that are looking into the record, but a code enforcement guy doesn't have that. If he walking around the town doesn't have a list of all the conditions and so forth that we've been attaching over the years to various parcels. That's my.
I promise you they do. So what happens is the process is they go out, they see something that may be a violation under normal code, or they have familiarity with the project. They come back, they research it, they look for, that's why when you ask why it takes so long, they spend multiple days researching these properties. They find and dig out, they come to us and ask about interpretation. We work together, we look at conflicts with the existing code or comp plan, we work through all those issues. It's not a perfect process, but it's not seamless, but it's a very interactive process, I'll say that. But they have the access to the same records as I do or any of other staff does when somebody comes in for a rezoning or special exception. That's how we got to where we are today with the Leaky Tiki. I handed him the special exception and said, here's a restriction on your property. This is what you're limited to. I found it in the address folder when I pulled up the address and looked for it. Good luck, and if you want to do something other than this, you have to change it.
Well, okay.
It's not an
been a
easy.
concern of mine over the years, because I cited one example, but there are a number of others that I could cite. But anyway, just a corollary question. What documents do we record? Do we record resolutions and ordinances that impose conditions and restrictions with the
Not-
county?
It would depend, obviously, ordinances, if they're ordinances of general applicability, they become part of the city code and are therefore made public, and under applicable law, the world's on notice of all those terms and conditions, whatever those ordinances may be. Site-specific ordinances are generally going to be rezonings. And to the extent that there are specific conditions in those ordinances, then there may or may not be a provision for the recording of that ordinance or a subsequent covenant, if that's one of the conditions that is agreed to. So it would have to be looked at that particular document and that particular approval to determine whether or not there's any requirement that any provisions or the general document be recorded. But as a general statement, some jurisdictions do require that. And again, some are more, I don't want to say adept, but more involved in making sure that those get recorded and that they're in the chain of title. And some jurisdictions no. So we would have to take a look at that.
Okay, as long as, and just one other sort of corollary situation is, the genesis of the variation in the Leaky Tiki was a variation that was granted by the county years ago. And as expressly stated in that county resolution, that it was, the variation was granted because a deed restriction prevented them from utilizing an adjacent lot or something. It's not quite clear to me, but it brought up to my mind, what role do deed restrictions play in the staff? How do we become aware of a deed restriction, if we become aware of them at all? And how, actually, how would we be aware of them unless you made a title search on every parcel of property that came before before us? Is that a factor that you consider at all?
So we have, I think, some steps in our application process and some that need to be improved to help identify some of those issues. So easements, for example, if there's easements granted to public access to a beach and you want to propose something on that property that may impact that, that should show up in a survey and at least some type of, I would like to see our codes require more title opinion or title search, whatever the terminology is that John could correct me on. Many communities do that part of it, but as far as deed restrictions of, I sold you a piece of property, I'm limiting you to building only one house on it, that generally is not applicable to the zone, under the zoning regulations. It's not enforceable or restrictive to the town itself based on zoning. But your statement covers a whole bunch of scenarios that are relevant, related to use of property, reservations or easements of access, things of that nature, joint access agreements, those are relevant. Those are types of things that we want to see and know about.
But there are height and setback provisions in many, deed restrictions too, and that are of record, but they're not ordinances or resolutions of the town.
And if I may,
Yeah.
and that is the issue. The courts of Florida have declared covenants to be private contractual matters between those who receive the benefit and the burden of those covenants. Local governments do not have the authority under Florida law to enforce private restricted covenants. All we have to, actually, let me rephrase it. All that we are allowed to do is enforce our code. We cannot enforce some third-party
I
agreement.
understand that, yes.
So whether or not there's a restricted covenant that may be at odds with what our code says, we can't factor that in. We have to apply our code.
Okay, well, thank you. These are issues that have been on my mind for a lot of time, but I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
And I appreciate the information related to easements and other access and things of that nature are critical to us too. So I think those are things that we look for, absolutely.
That's a separate issue. And if there's let's give the example I just said. Let's say the covenant has an easement provision that runs in our favor, then yes, we would look at that. But the restricted covenant that says you can't build higher than X feet or wider than X feet, and can only have, the following 6 colors painted, to paint your building with, that's not something that we have the authority to enforce under Florida law, unfortunately.
And the problem is, not only do we not have the authority, as you point out, but other homeowners in that area often do not either, according, the title company takes a position that they don't have that authority either. So,
There are, as Jason indicated, certain situations that we are, when there's an issue or the survey in particular shows something that would indicate that, again, the example, an easement running in favor of the public, then we obviously look closer at those types of issues. But in general, restricted covenants that are between private parties, we don't have the ability to enforce those.
Oh, yes, I'm not going to be here next month, so I need to get excused absence.
I don't think I am either. What's the date? What is the date in June?
Hold on, what?
I leave town on the 10th.
June 11th.
That's what I was, on the 11th?
Yep.
Yes.
I leave town on the 10th. I will not be here.
I have 2 down.
Would you be here on the 10th?
He leaves on the 10th.
I forget what time my plane is offhand. I think it's around noon.
That would be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the agenda, yeah.
And you already said our agenda's going to be pretty packed.
There's a couple items, yes.
So either we're going a week early, or
No, we'll do what you need to do. It's just for context. Every time we get meetings closer and closer to each other, such as your meeting, council meetings, it's very strenuous on all of us to prepare all those agendas.
how long are you gone?
Month.
A month.
Oh, a month.
I'm gone to I'm gone about the middle of July, but I didn't think we were going to have a meeting in July anyway, were we?
That's typically when we take off, isn't it?
Sometimes you haven't in the 1 year I was here, so I was hoping you did.
So either, and it's tough on you a week early. But
the
here's the
reality
question, are
is,
you back a week later? When are you back?
I'm looking at that right. I'm gone from the 7th to the 16th, or the 6th to the 16th.
so the reality is, because of the way the schedule falls,
Of 7th to the 16th.
okay, I'm trying to do, the council has August meetings, we said. I'm just trying to do some math in my head of weeks. I don't want to push too many people out another month. That's going to be tough. If you can make it work, we'll do whatever you can do in June. What I don't want to do is skip June and July and then have them in the LPA in August, and then it pushes them out to September, October, and then we're running into budget too, so.
Thursday, 6th.
I live on Friday the 7th.
What about doing something, is it,
No, I leave the 6th.
Maybe
Yeah,
Pat can nod her
I
head.
leave the 6th. I'm sorry.
We-
6th through the 16th.
You do leave Thursday, 6th, so it would be Wednesday the 5th.
Hold on. I think council has MMP on the 6th. I'm going to have.
Well, it's out. Well,
Yes.
Where is it?
The town council has the MMP on the 6th.
or we can move it to the Friday 7th, and Dan's here, but you're not. Oh, no, on Friday, though. Actually, no, I gotta nix that, because I will be most likely out that day. I hate to do it, it's looking like the 4th. Or we go with the 18th. Well, that would be
Let's
too
start-
out on the 18th.
Can we start with the 18th and say who's going to be here? For sure. No? Okay.
What about Monday, the 17th? Or are you out that whole
Council
week?
meeting.
What? Council meeting. So who can be here on the 18th? 1, 2, 3, 4. You're gone. You're iffy. So now we're back to,
So would you have a full attendance on the 4th?
I'll be here on the 4th.
Okay, my heartburn is because the week before that is Memorial holiday, when agenda items are due for the council and for you at the same time. So I'm just trying to not lose our minds, frankly.
Who can be here on the 4th?
It's not just me, I mean, it's administration, everybody's. gonna be-
1.
I'm constantly
Yeah.
trying to find my
2,
mind
3.
anyway.
So you got
I've
pretty
lost
much,
it a long time ago.
you pretty much have a full board on the 4th. I don't know about Lori, but at least, it looks like the 18th you would be missing potentially Dan. Maybe,
About Lori.
and I don't know about Lori.
Okay.
Do we want to, can we do this via email poll and see what her schedule is like when she can respond?
Does the 4 versus 3 make that a difference for you?
To have quorum.
Yeah.
Right. What, right, I mean,
But if she can make,
are you okay with 4? I guess that's my,
Yeah, I'm
the way I
okay
meant
with
to
4.
say. Okay.
The minimum is 4.
Yeah, it gets a little iffy though on,
I stated that incorrectly. I meant, are you okay with the 4?
I know, the 4th. I'm fine with the 4th.
I mean, 4 people, so the
4
4th,
people.
okay,
He was
so
saying 4 people. I'm with him.
so it's that decision. If you do the 4th of June, I ask for your patience on the agenda. And I know you always want it further and further in advance, just, you're gonna have a lot of reading, short period going into that, so just be aware of that.
I'll go with the 4th.
But if we
Okay.
can have it before,
You'll have it before, you have to have it before, it may not be a full week before.
I will be playing with my grandchildren.
Okay, to the 4th.
That's a Tuesday, right?
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
Tuesday to 4th.
More than likely, it'll be that Thursday. You'll get the agenda before.
I have,
No meeting on the 11th, meeting on the 4th.
on the 4th, I have a question. What is going on with Mango Street? It looks like that lot hasn't changed at all. The Mango Street parking lot. And that came in front of us almost 2 years ago.
Last year.
Mm.
You had the special exception and all that,
I
or the
remember that.
rezoning, all that. They've got all their approvals.
And they're moving forward? Because the lot hasn't changed. Doesn't look one bit different than 2 years ago.
One of the things I have on my list is to reach out to the owner and remind him that people are asking, and he really needs to move
Well,
forward.
doesn't he have the $300 a day or crazy?
Met all the conditions of approval to get the approvals that he had.
Wow.
He has gotten his engineering site approval, he's gotten all that landscape buffer, drainage, all that has been approved.
Approved.
Right.
But it wasn't one of the conditions when we saw this, and this is one, I mean, almost when I first showed up here. How long ago? Didn't he have like 3 months to do all that?
Had conditions to meet deadlines.
And he met them.
and he's met them.
And it taken this long.
Well, it's been approved for a while. No, I mean, people keep asking. The only thing I can put pressure on him and encourage him, and I think he will understand that he spent the money to do the engineering and all that. So, my assumption was waiting until season was over, not interrupting that, and then doing it. But you're right. We're into May, and I haven't seen anything. So.
But even prior to this season, I mean, it just seems like it keeps drawing out further and further and further, and he's figured a way to get around to $300 a day or whatever, and it extended this by 2 years. Isn't the point of that to get people in compliance faster and moving forward faster?
If he is using the property, I will make sure we are checking. I don't think they're using the property for parking now. I may be wrong.
I used it all season.
But if they are using the property now for parking, then we will follow up on that.
It just feels like
to answer your question, he has all of his development approvals that he needs to move forward with site development.
It just feels like this thing has been drawn out way longer with the idea that he was supposed to be having this done within 6 months, even being in front of, or 6 months for him being approved by council, all his special exceptions. He had 6 months, and now I'll tell you, it's been a lot longer than that.
Yep.
And
I
it,
remember.
yeah.
Remember, he had two processes.
Yep.
He had a temporary special exception, and then he had a rezoning. So that's why I think it feels forever, because it really was forever. It was a year going through those approvals.
Longer than that, but okay. That was the only thing I was, as I was driving by the other day.
You're not the only
looking
one
at-
asking. I have to answer. Yes, we will. By next month, you'll have an answer of timing. I will get.
How about some way to move him forward? I mean,
Yes.
isn't that ultimately what we're trying to do, is get this looking better and,
Yes.
applying things fairly so that he doesn't get away with having not meeting our code for parking lots. And he hasn't met it for a long time.
Correct.
Yeah, but we have the expectation that other people do make it and do it faster. I get it. We're splitting hairs right now.
We will follow up. No, you're not. It's a fair point, and I'll report back to you next month on what that status is and where they are.
That's all I have. Oh, we have 2 council meetings, May 20th and June 3rd. You said June 3rd will be the noise ordinance. What? He said for June 3rd you were going to put the noise ordinance, not noise ordinance, leaky tiki on June 3rd.
Thank you. Yeah, right now, town council schedule for them is the June 3rd. So
we know if you're
if somebody
gonna-
wants to attend
I
on
can
behalf of the
attend
LPA.
I have not attended one, so I'm happy to relieve you of that unless you're desiring to do that. I feel
Is
out
there
of sheer
anything on the May,
guilt,
how about
yes.
this? Is there anything on the May 20th? Council meeting you know of?
I don't believe so, no.
All right, then you can have June 3rd. Thank you, Jim.
She'll take the 20th, you take the 3rd.
So June 3rd, council meeting, Jim will be attending and conveying our discussions to town council. That is all I have. So we're on to attorney items and reports. Okay.
No, they moved next month's meeting? They moved it to the 4th.
No, the council.
Yeah, there's a council meeting on the 3rd, the day before.
All right, so we're good?
Yes.
And Jim Adderholt will be attending that for the LPA. Attorney items? Wasn't there some, a major legislative change recently on, at least and I didn't read up on it, I apologize, is that when it comes to development, and I just saw a quick blurb about now the plaintiff or the person who brings it, changes it, there is some implications to our comprehensive plan. If I saw a summary or something.
So, yeah,
Are you following what was recently passed? Do you know anything?
There has been a potential fee shifting provision that's been added to some state legislation. If that's, I think that's what we can provide you with more detailed information or a copy of that legislation. I also will check because it may already be on, we received on a weekly basis our state lobbyist provides us with an update, a report on what's going on in the Florida legislature during that time period. And he just recently sent a summary of everything that happened that would potentially impact local governments. To the extent that that's in there, we look to see and we can forward it to you.
I thought I read something where there was a provision in that would affect our comprehensive plan, or when it's reviewed, or something of that sort.
It
and
has
that
to do with
10 year function.
challenges, I think it was. The only thing, APA Florida, I'm on their mailing list, obviously being a
Okay.
member, and they sent us out saying that they've drafted a letter to the governor to overturn that, basically asking to, because it, in their opinion, it affects the participation of the public somehow. So I don't know all the details. I just got the email yesterday or the day before. So it's tied into, I think, the challenges of land development code and comprehensive plan projects, related projects.
Okay.
But when I'll get some of that information, I can forward it to you all when just like, I guess the League of Cities, right? Or something like that has that information. Or you said the consultant. So I'll forward whatever I have to you all.
I just had read a quick blurb. It
Mm-hmm.
came across my newsfeed, and I didn't have a chance to look at it.
He did overturn the preemption of the plastics and straws.
Right.
Straws.
So
Does that also go towards the plastic bags?
I believe that was part of the same legislation, yes.
So it opened up the ability
No,
to.
he's line item, so I shouldn't say that. I don't know how that affects that.
I think that bill already passed. And yes, I'd have to check. I thought
We
that
can
came
now
before.
start working
That
toward
was
banning them?
preempted a couple of years before Governor DeSantis, and may have been signed, is the operative word, by Governor Scott, because I know that issue came up. As you all know, what happens is that a local government adopts a prohibition on one of these items, and immediately this following year, someone sponsors legislation to preempt any further prohibitions. And the issue of plastic bags, my distinct recollection, was first raised 4 years ago. And some local governments did, in fact, adopt a ban on it, and immediately the legislature the following year took action to preempt it, and I believe that was when Governor Scott was still our governor, and that he did, in fact, sign that bill.
So do we know if this new bill
No,
rolls that back?
I think that the current preemption proposal was for straws.
And sunscreens and.
Correct. But we
pesticides.
can verify that for you
Okay.
all.
Be interesting to know. Anything else from the attorney? Jason?
July, formal, whether you are or not going to have a meeting. Thank you.
I think most of us plan on that.
Yes, okay.
Because that's been tradition when we have it.
Yeah.
So I kind of,
And while I'm at it, since that's issue, thank you for doing that. Kelly presented to you, you've informally met her, I guess, technically, but she's a planner working with us, and she worked on the historic stuff. She'll be probably working as the liaison on that committee. And you'll be seeing her she stole her from Lee County, and she's familiar with our code since there's a lot of similarities between the two, so.
Can she
Please,
introduce herself
absolutely.
and give us some background?
Yes.
I have master's degree in urban planning. I graduated from University of Florida. I worked at Lee County for 3 months, and I shifted to Weiler Engineering, and now I'm working here.
okay. So this
And we
is in
keep
addition
saying-
to you and Sarah, we now have
We have
our new
a
friend.
well-rounded,
Okay.
competent staff to help keep things moving. So we've substantially reduced the permitting time since Kelly's been working here with us too. So it's, that's a bonus to the public if you're trying to get
Yeah, a
permits.
little
Some
longer.
listening may
Say it
disagree with
again.
that. But
Go
what's that?
Gators.
Say it again.
But we've reduced the permitting time substantially, so.
In answer to the question, I'm sorry to go back. The legislature did, in fact, adopt at this session a House Bill 7103 that includes a provision that says that if, which is new, and so it applies prospectively, not retroactively, that if a resident or a citizens group, nonprofit entity brings a challenge alleging inconsistency of a development project with the local government's comprehensive plan, and they lose that action, they don't prevail in that action, that they have to pay
Pay the
local
fees.
government attorney's fees.
Pay the fees.
So that's
yeah.
moving forward, not backwards?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Did I think
We
that was
have
gonna
a
be all
couple
of
of
our
those
next
pending, and
question.
unfortunately, it doesn't, those laws can't apply retroactively, they only apply prospectively.
All right, moving along, items for next month's agenda? Anything?
I don't have any, but I won't be here anyway.
You'll be the 4th.
The 4th. We're
You're
doing
gonna
it
be
the
here
4th
now.
You will be here.
It's the 4th now.
Oh, the 4th.
June
Yeah,
4th.
oh, yes, I will be here. And I have no suggestions for the agenda.
No, I don't.
Jane? Tim? Any ideas what we're expecting next month?
Yeah, so Publix is going through their process. They're looking at adding a liquor store. Code relevant, not personal relevancy. There's a couple other, and I think the text amendment for the pools at least will be on there. And there's one other that, we're waiting to see on a resubmittal on the Tops property.
The what?
The Tops property. So both those
Oh.
right now, both the Publix and Tops property applications are pending resubmittals and timelines, because we're not going to force anything with the schedules being so tight. So there's no guarantee they'll be on that June, but that's what they're working towards.
Even though the property's for sale, they're doing a development?
Yes, an amendment to the plan development, to the CPD.
Sounds like we'll be busy next month. Any public comment?
It's the beginning of the month and not all of the month, right?
All right, no one's here for public comment? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Can't imagine anybody doesn't want to. Thank you.